Chapter 182. On the second day after bringing Hua Xi and the others back, Lu Yi used her authority as a guardian to bring them back to the sect after consulting with the three of them. Shui Yuan used her status as a palm guardian to brand Hua Xi and the others with the Jade Blood Sect's battlefield mark. After paying respects to the sect master, Hua Xi and the others officially became disciples of the Jade Blood Sect. At this point, including Yi, the Jade Blood Sect had 5 disciples in the Spirit Stream realm. Ruan Lingyu was very happy, and even the dull Kong Niu smiled a little more. Their days as rogue cultivators had been very poor, but from today onwards, they were members of a sect. As for Hua Xi, Lu Yi could feel that she didn't have a strong desire to join a sect. If she really wanted to join a sect, with her current status as a 6th-order medical cultivator, she could go to any sect in the outer circle and be valued. Medical cultivators would always be indispensable talents in any sect. This time, she was willing to join the Jade Blood Sect because of her previous experience. She wanted Ruan Lingyu and Kong Niu to have a more stable life, and also because of Lu Yi. Now that she thought about it, she had the idea of recruiting Lu Yi into the Scattered Society, but she didn't mention it because she considered which great force Lu Yi belonged to. In the end, the Scattered Society was gone, and she joined the Jade Blood Sect. It could only be said that the world was wonderful beyond words. After becoming a disciple of the Jade Blood Sect, she would receive a monthly salary. This was a benefit that every sect had. It was the first time she received her monthly salary from Shui Yuan. Ruan Lingyu smiled and cried, and Yi comforted her for a while. In the cultivation room of the sect, Lu Yi spent a lot of effort to construct spirit-gathering spirit runes in several rooms. This way, when Hua Xi and the others cultivated here in the future, their efficiency would be higher. Now that they had joined the Jade Blood Sect, their second senior sister gave them a lot of monthly salary, so they didn't have to worry about cultivation resources for a short time. Walking out of the cultivation room, Hua Xi was waiting outside. She had just entered her cultivation room to test it out and found that the world energy inside was unbelievably rich. She was really shocked by Lu Ye's work and vaguely understood why Lu Ye's cultivation could improve so quickly. "What's the matter?" Lu Yi looked at her. Hua Xi said, "You went to Ing Mountain to find me because of the Spirit Stream garrison battle. Who told you that?" Lu Yi was surprised. He hadn't had the chance to tell Hua Xi about this yet. He had originally planned to discuss it with her in 2 days, but he hadn't expected her to have received the news in advance. "Chen Yu said so. He said that you wanted to find someone from the loose cultivators to accompany you, but there wasn't anyone suitable." Lu Yi nodded. "I do have such considerations. Why didn't you tell me then? Are you afraid that I would drag you?" "That's not it. I just didn't have the time. Since you know, what do you think? You sex the sex stream is a sect. Lu Yi sect. Sex Lu sex. If a 5th order like you isn't afraid, why should a 6th order be?" Hua Xi smiled sweetly. Lu Yi nodded and turned to walk towards Divine Secret Hall. But after walking a short distance, he came back and looked at Hua Xi seriously. "The garrison envoys of other sects have at least a 7th order. It will be dangerous if you go in. Are you really going?" "Yes," Hua Xi pursed her lips and smiled. "If I don't go, who will collect your corpse?" Lu Yi snorted and turned to leave. Soon, he arrived at Divine Secret Hall. Using his authority as a garrison envoy, he connected to the Divine Secret Pillar and spent 500 merit points to buy a blessing. In an instant, he felt some wonderful changes take place inside the Divine Secret Pillar in front of him. Accompanied by a cracking sound, the Divine Secret Pillar rotated twice. Immediately after, the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual chi began to surge and become denser. This was the effect of the Divine Secret Pillar's blessing. The original Divine Secret Pillar could only make the world energy in the sex station 10% richer than in the wild. Another blessing could increase it by another 10%. In other words, the world energy in Blue Blood Sex Station was 20% richer than in the wild. Lu Yi tried to buy another blessing but failed because he had run out of merit points. According to the feedback from his garrison envoy Mark, the second blessing would cost 1,000 merit points. He didn't know how much the third one would cost. Fourth senior brother had said before that the Divine Secret Pillar's blessing would become more expensive the further it was used, so this kind of thing wasn't something a single cultivator could afford. It required the efforts of the entire sect to accumulate merit points. In addition, Lu Yi, as a garrison envoy, could make some adjustments to the range of the Divine Secret Pillar's blessing. He could limit the effect of this blessing to certain areas. In other words, if he wanted to, this blessing couldn't be applied to the market where the rogue cultivators were. With this blessing, Blue Blood Sex Station would be eligible to sign up for the Spirit Stream Garrison Battle. Lu Yi fiddled with it for a while before figuring out how to sign up. As the Divine Secret Pillar fell, the battlefield envoy Mark heated up slightly and a lot of information poured into his mind. There were still a few days before the Spirit Stream Garrison Battle officially began, and before that, Lu Yi could raise his cultivation to the 6th order. He was now only one step away from that realm. This was the reason why he wanted to participate in the Spirit Stream Garrison Battle. If he was only a 5th order, he would still be a little weak, but if he reached the 6th order, the situation would be different. Blue Blood Sect's main sect. Inside the main hall of the Garrison Peak, Lu Yi and Hua Xi came together. "Sect Master, were you looking for us?" Lu Yi cupped his fists and saluted, while Hua Xi also performed a disciple's salute. The Sect Master, who was standing there, turned around and asked, "Your second senior sister said that you are preparing to participate in the Spirit Stream Garrison Battle and have already signed up?" "Yes." "It's good to see the world." The Sect Master nodded slightly. Blue Blood Sect hasn't accepted any disciples for several dozen years, but now that you've joined, the sect has become much livelier. Unfortunately, these old bones of mine can't help you much. Last time I almost killed you, Lu Yi quickly said. Since this disciple has joined Blue Blood Sect, it is only natural for this disciple to take care of the sect's grievances. Moreover, this disciple was able to turn misfortune into fortune in the end thanks to the sect's prestige, so Sect Master doesn't need to worry about it. The Sect Master stroked his beard. "It's hard for you to think so," letting out a sigh, he said. "Come with me, I'll take you to a place." Saying so, the Sect Master walked out with Lu Yi and Hua Xi hurriedly following. Outside the main hall, the Sect Master waved his sleeve and sent out a burst of spiritual energy, wrapping Lu Yi and Hua Xi up before flying up into the sky. A moment later, they landed on top of a Spirit Stream peak. Lu Yi turned his head and saw the Garrison Peak not far away. In other words, this place was not far from the Garrison Peak, so it was likely they were still inside Blue Blood Sect's main sect. At the top of the Garrison Peak was a building that looked like a palace but wasn't. It had a strange shape. Standing in front of the building, the Sect Master turned back to Lu Yi and Hua Xi and said, "Wait here." Turning around, the Sect Master straightened his expression and walked forward. Outside the hall, Hua Xi touched Lu Yi's arm and their eyes met, inquiring. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. He had never been here before and didn't know why the Sect Master had brought him and Hua Xi here. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he suddenly heard a woman's voice from inside. "Old thing, you actually have the face to come find me?" Lu Yi was startled. There was actually someone here? Just as he was feeling surprised, a gust of wind blew over and with Lu Yi's eyesight, he vaguely saw a black shadow fly out of the building and hit a big tree outside, causing a loud bang. With his clothes fluttering, Lu Yi's cheeks were stung by the wind. Turning around, he narrowed his eyes and his expression changed greatly. Quickly stepping forward with Hua Xi, he helped the Sect Master up from the ground. The Sect Master's left eye was bruised and there was a clear fist mark. "Sect Master, this..." Lu Yi had no idea what had happened, only that a woman lived here and that woman had punched the sect master. It's fine, it's fine. The sect master gently patted the clothes on his chest and explained to Lu Yi, an old friend of this old master lives here. Her personality is a bit irritable. I'll go talk to her again, you just wait here. Lu Yi and Hua Ci watched speechlessly as the sect master walked into the building again. Scram, if you dare come in again, this old lady will break all 3 of your legs. There was another angry roar. Then, the sect leader was sent flying again. He crashed into the same tree and slowly slid down. This time, the sect master's right eye was also bruised, 2 fist marks, one on the left and one on the right, extremely symmetrical. Sect master. Lu Yi couldn't bear to watch. The sect master raised his hand. It's fine, just let her vent her anger. Standing up, he walked forward for the 3rd time. Even if there were millions of people, he would still go. Soon, spiritual energy fluctuations came from inside again, accompanied by a woman's cursing. Lu Yi and Hua Ci stood outside and trembled with fear, fearing that the sect master would be thrown out again. But this time, the sect master wasn't thrown out, and the cursing inside gradually stopped. The situation developed a bit too quickly, and Lu Yi couldn't wrap his head around it. Hua Ci leaned over and whispered in his ear, "The person living here is most likely one of the sect master's old lovers." Nonsense. Lu Yi rolled his eyes. Didn't you see the sect master get hammered? Hua Ci chuckled. You're still young, you don't understand women. You do? I'm a woman, of course I understand. Hua Ci puffed out her chest. Lu Yi felt that what she said made a lot of sense, and was suddenly speechless. After a while, the sect master's dignified voice came from inside. Come in, both of you. Lu Yi and Hua Ci immediately straightened their faces and respectfully answered, yes, before walking into the building one after the other. After stepping through the door and entering the interior, Lu Yi's expression was stunned. This building didn't look big from the outside, but the inside was a completely different world. On the walls of the entire building, mysterious spirit patterns swam like fish, appearing and disappearing from time to time, changing unpredictably. He looked at the spirit patterns and was surprised that he didn't recognize a single one. They were in a large hall, and the sect master was standing there. Beside him stood a graceful woman. The woman's age seemed to be a mystery. At first glance, she seemed to be in her 20s, but if one looked carefully, there was a sense of vicissitudes in her eyes. Chapter 183. The woman couldn't be too young because the sect leader said that she was an old friend of his. Conservatively speaking, she should be someone from the same generation as the sect leader. She looked young because of her beauty. This is Madame Yun, the sect leader introduced. Lu Yi and Hua Ci both bowed. Greetings, Madame Yun. Madame Yun nodded slightly and looked at Lu Yi from head to toe. She said, that old fart said that you had some fortuitous encounter in the spirit stream battlefield, and one of them was the inheritance of a spirit tattooist? She didn't know how this misunderstanding got out, but it probably had something to do with his ability to activate spirit tattoos in battle. Lu Yi turned to look at the sect leader, who nodded slightly. Lu Yi replied, yes. No matter how he thought about it, the talent tree was related to the inheritance of a spirit tattooist. Activate your spirit tattoos for me to see, Madame Yun instructed. Lu Yi hesitated for a moment before opening his palm and activating a defensive spirit tattoo. Madame Yun revealed a look of surprise. This speed. She only heard from the sect leader that this little guy called Lu Yi's fortuitous encounter was related to a spirit tattooist, so she didn't ask too much. Only now did she know that this little guy in front of her had mastered spirit tattoos to the extent that he could activate them at will. Search. However, she was also an experienced and knowledgeable person. If the disciples of those top sects studied spirit tattoos from a young age, they might have a chance to do it. She stepped forward and lowered her head to check the spirit tattoo in Lu Yi's hand. This is a defensive. Your spirit tattoo. She suddenly frowned. No one knew what she had discovered, but she actually grabbed Lu Ye's hand and looked at it seriously. Lu Ye cast a pleading look at the sect leader. The sect leader slowly shook his head, indicating for him to calm down. After a long while, Madame Yun put down Lu Ye's hand and fell into deep thought with a leisurely expression. Seeing this, the sect leader asked, "What's wrong with his spirit tattoo?" "There's no problem." Madame Yun shook her head. "It's just a little different from the spirit tattoos of the 9 provinces, but it's more reasonable. As for the specific differences, we still have to do some comparisons." As she spoke, she looked at Lu Yi. "Do you know any other spirit tattoos?" Lu Yi said truthfully, "I know 3 more." "Show it to me." Lu Yi activated sharpness, a spirit gathering, and a blood stain one by one. After careful inspection, Madame Yun said with certainty, "The inheritance you obtained is somewhat extraordinary. The person who left behind this inheritance must have extremely high attainments in the path of spiritual tattoos." The headmaster was surprised. It was rare to hear Madame Yun have such a high evaluation of others. He asked curiously, "How is he compared to you?" Madame Yun shook her head. "He's more powerful than me. This person's Tao of spirit veins has already surpassed the current system of the 9 provinces. It's another way of displaying it, but every type of spirit veins is much more powerful than the ones in the 9 provinces." She looked at Lu Yi again. "How much do you know about the Tao of spirit veins?" Lu Yi sweated. "I only know how to use these 4 spirit runes. I don't know anything else." Madame Yun was surprised. She laughed in spite of herself and said, "It seems that the inheritance you received is not complete. This is a common occurrence." There were indeed many fortuitous encounters in the spirit stream battlefield. There were also many people who obtained inheritances left behind by unknown experts. However, some inheritances became incomplete due to various reasons. From Madame Yun's point of view, Lu Yi could activate the 4 spirit runes as he wished, but he didn't know much about spiritual tattoos. This was obviously the reason why the inheritance was incomplete. A complete inheritance would at least allow Lu Yi to understand the construction method and basic characteristics of spiritual tattoos. "In the future, you can come and visit me often. You provide me with these spirit runes to study, and in return, I can teach you some knowledge about spiritual tattoos. How about it?" As soon as she said this, the headmaster, who was standing beside Madame Yun, shot a glance at Lu Yi. Lu Yi understood tacitly. "Yes, thank you, senior." Madame Yun nodded with a smile. Her expression when looking at Lu Yi became much more amiable. The headmaster coughed lightly. "Don't forget about the proper business. Follow me." Madame Yun walked to the side as she spoke. She led the 3 of them through a long corridor and arrived at a room. The room wasn't big, and there was a bed in the middle. There was also a stool at the side. After entering the room, Madame Yun formed a seal with one hand and tapped lightly on the wall. Spiritual energy surged, and the entire room became brightly lit, as if a few strong lamps were shining. However, the light wasn't intense, but rather gentle. "Take off your clothes and climb on," Madame Yun instructed. Lu Yi didn't understand. The headmaster said, "Madame Yun will tattoo a spiritual tattoo on your body. This type of spiritual tattoo is called an inscription. It can display the effects of a spiritual tattoo. Perhaps it will be of some help in the Battle of Lingxi." This was the first time Lu Yi heard of such a thing, and he was instantly curious. However, thinking that this was the reason why the headmaster brought him and Hua Xi here, he didn't hesitate. He took off his clothes and climbed on the bed. Madame Yun sat on a stool at the side and took out a jade box. She opened it, and inside the jade box were thin needles of different length. "Where is it?" Madame Yun extended her hand to the headmaster. The headmaster took out a bottle and handed it to her. She opened the bottle and sniffed it lightly. She raised her eyebrows and said, "The blood of a true lake stage great demon. Which demonic beast is it?" The headmaster replied, "Hua Fang." "That's rare." Madame Yun nodded, then teased. It's rare for you to be so generous. The headmaster looked embarrassed and didn't reply. Madame Yun took out a long needle from the jade box and immersed it in Huafang's blood. She activated her spiritual energy, and the long needle immediately seemed to come to life. It drank the demonic beast's blood and instantly turned dark red. She lifted the long needle and pressed it on Lu Ye's shoulder blade. It will hurt a little. Bear with it. As her voice fell, she took the long needle and pierced it into Lu Ye's back. Lu Ye immediately felt as if he was being pricked by a needle, followed by a burning pain. This pain wasn't intense, but it made one's heart itch, making it difficult to endure. He gritted his teeth. Madame Yun's hand was very steady. She changed the thin needles in her hand one after another. Her movements were sometimes fast and sometimes slow. Even her spiritual energy fluctuations were constantly changing with her movement. Hua Xiai stood to the side and watching as a strange spiritual tattoo pattern slowly appeared on Lu Ye's back. After a full 2 hours, the last needle was inserted. Madame Yun breathed a sigh of relief and gently patted Lu Ye's back. It's done. Lu Ye stood up and sensed his surroundings. He could faintly feel that there was something behind him. It was a strange feeling, as if it had merged with his body, but it also felt like an external object. He could feel that, if he channeled his spiritual energy, he could even activate it. The headmaster explained from the side, "Your current cultivation is still low, so it's not suitable for you to tattoo permanent spiritual tattoos. This time, Madame Yun gave you a temporary tattoo. If you encounter a powerhouse you can't defeat, you can activate it with your spiritual energy, and it will give you the ability to fly. This spiritual tattoo is called Flying Wings," Madame Yun added. "If you use it with all your strength, it can only allow you to fly for 6 hours at most. Any longer and this tattoo will lose its effect." A flying spiritual tattoo. Lu Ye's heart trembled as he felt the headmaster's concern. He and Hua Xiai were going to participate in the spirit stream battle, so they couldn't improve their strength too much, but with this flying wings tattoo, even if they encountered a powerhouse they couldn't defeat, they would have a chance to escape. However, the price of this tattoo was not small. Not to mention the need for a skilled craftsman like Madame Yun, even Huafang's blood was a rare treasure. Using the blood of a true lake realm great monster on a spirit stream realm cultivator like Lu Yi was really a waste. Lu Yi was deeply moved. "What are you waiting for?" Madame Yun suddenly asked with a sullen face. The headmaster and Lu Yi hurriedly walked out awkwardly. The door was tightly shut. The headmaster led Lu Yi out of the main hall. "Flying requires practice to master the basic. Do you want to try it now?" the headmaster asked. "I was thinking the same thing," Lu Yi nodded, feeling a little excited. Although Yang Kai had experience flying through the air before, he had always been carried by others and had never tried flying himself. He had thought that he would only have the opportunity to do so after reaching the 8th or 9th order, but now he could experience it in advance. Although the flying wing tattoo could only last for a total of 6 hours, what the headmaster said was right. This kind of thing still needed to be practiced before one could grasp the essentials. Otherwise, if one really waited for danger to descend before flying, who knows what kind of mistake would occur. Pushing his spirit chi, Lu Yi poured it into his back and activated the flying wings tattoo. With a loud crash, a pair of fiery red wings appeared on his left and right shoulder blades. These wings weren't thick and were instead somewhat thin, and from the shape of the wings, they looked like the wings of some kind of monster beast. Lu Yi estimated that these wings should be similar to Huafang's. With a thought, Lu Yi flapped his wings lightly, causing a gust of wind to howl. Suddenly, Lu Ye's whole body transformed into a fiery streak of light as he slammed into a certain direction. The headmaster waved his hand and a soft stream of spirit chi wrapped around Lu Yi, holding him in place mid-air. Looking at a large tree not far in front of him, Lu Ye's forehead dripped with cold sweat. Fortunately, the headmaster was nearby watching over him, otherwise, he would have been seriously injured. The headmaster slowly withdrew his spirit chi, and Lu Yi once again controlled the spirit chi wings behind him to try to fly. After repeated failures and thrills, Lu Yi slowly began to master the trick and was gradually able to fly steadily, but he still didn't dare to fly too fast, otherwise he wouldn't be able to control himself. After half an hour, Lu Yi completely let go of the flying wings tattoo and flew back and forth in the air, clearly having a lot of fun. Considering the duration of the flying wings tattoo, Lu Yi reluctantly flew down, the fiery red wings behind him slowly disappearing. This flying wings tattoo was definitely an escape tool, the only drawback was that it consumed a lot of spirit chi. After half an hour, Lu Yi felt that he only had about 30% of his spirit chi left, so unless it was absolutely necessary, he couldn't use the flying wings tattoo casually. After waiting for a moment, Hua Si came out. The headmaster brought Lu Yi forward to say goodbye to Madame Yun. Madame Yun waved her hand and turned around to enter the room. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows at Hua Si and said, "Do you want to try flying?" The headmaster said that flying requires more practice to master the essentials. Hua Si happily said, "Okay." As spirit chi surged, a pair of green wings appeared on her back and she slowly floated up. After swaying left and right for a while, she slowly stabilized herself. After a short while, looking at Hua Si dancing in the sky like a butterfly, the corners of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. Why did people seem a little different? Chapter 184. Inside the station's cultivation room, the Spirit Gathering Array and the three-sided Spirit Gathering inscriptions were operating at the same time. World energy madly poured into the room, filling it with dense world energy and blood chi. Whether it was world energy or blood chi, they were all being drawn into Lu Ye's body by some kind of force. Not only that, but his abdomen was also emitting a thunderous buzzing sound, which was caused by the gluttonous meal. At a certain moment, Lu Yi opened his eyes and looked down at the back of his hand. The battlefield imprint was slightly hot, and there was a faint surge of heaven's secrets. It was time. He stopped cultivating and got up, took back the scale armor placed on the Spirit Gathering Array, pushed open the door, and walked out. A moment later, he arrived in front of the Heaven's Fate Pillar in Heaven's Fate Hall. Hua Si was not here yet. Recently, she and second senior sister had been inseparable, and Lu Yi did not know what she was busy with. However, both women were medical cultivators, so it was likely that second senior sister was teaching Hua Si something about medical cultivation. While waiting, Lu Yi activated the battlefield imprint and checked his own information. Name: Lu Yi. Identity: Blue Blood Sect Disciple Cultivation. 83 Apertures. Location: Spirit Stream Battlefield. Merit: 26. It had been almost 2 months since the Battle of Golden Light Peak. Since his injuries had healed and the talent tree's ability to burn pill toxins was restored, Lu Ye's cultivation had been increasing day by day. On the day he returned from Madame Yun's place, he had opened 81 apertures, breaking through to the 6th Order Spirit Stream realm. Today, he had opened 2 more apertures. One had to know that this was only because he had been delayed. Previously, when he went to Wing Mountain to find Hua Si and the others, it took him more than 10 days to go back and forth. If he had not been delayed, his cultivation would have improved even faster. That was because the cultivation environment in the station was much better than before, and it was stable enough. In terms of cultivation, he had reached his expectations, but as for merit, it was a bit of an eyesore. If he hadn't killed a 7th Order cultivator in Yingshan, Lu Yi would only have 5 merit points instead of 26. In the past, Lu Yi did not know what merit points were used for, but now he knew. With a mysterious place like the Heaven's Secret Treasury, merit points were extremely attractive to any cultivator. Not to mention, he still needed to spend contribution points to purchase fuel suitable for his talent tree from the Tianji treasury. It was foreseeable that he would need a lot of contribution points in the future. It would be far too slow to accumulate merit points by simply killing people, unless one could kill enemies of a higher cultivation level. The Spirit Creek Garrison War was a good place to go. Every sect had a foundational blessing as a bargaining chip. As long as one was strong enough, they would be able to obtain a massive amount of merit points. In fact, Lu Yi was allowed to bring Hu Po with him to the Battle of Spirit Stream. He had already formed a pet contract with Hu Po, so Hu Po was considered his pet beast and a part of his strength. Therefore, he could bring Hu Po with him to the Battle of Spirit Stream. However, neither second senior sister nor fourth senior brother advised him to do so. Because the aftermath of the Battle of Golden Light Summit had just subsided, many people knew that Lu Yi had a big white tiger by his side. If he brought Hu Po in, he would be easily recognized. It would be bad if the myriad demons Ridge besieged him. Rather than taking such a risk, he might as well not bring it. At the very least, he could hide his identity. Indeed, many people on Golden Light Summit had seen Lu Yi before, but there were so many cultivators in the Spirit Creek Garrison War that there were even more who hadn't seen him before or didn't recognize him. A figure slowly appeared at the side, wrapped in a refreshing fragrance. Hua Xi had arrived. Lu Yi looked her up and down and said in surprise, "New clothes? New look?" Hua Xi didn't wear this dress in the past, so it was obvious that she had just changed into it. This was a very tight white dress, and the hem of the white dress was decorated with little red flowers. The pure color made Hua Xi's skin look even more delicate and delicate. However, Lu Yi quickly realized that something was wrong. This wasn't just a beautiful dress. A spirit artifact? Lu Yi raised an eyebrow. Second senior sister gave it to me. She used to wear it when her cultivation was low. She doesn't need it anymore. Could second senior sister's figure support this dress? This dress was perfect for Hua Xi. If she wore it on second senior sister's petite figure, she could probably perform in a big play. Lu Yi was a little jealous. I was the one who entered the sect first. Hua Xi pursed her lips and smiled. Second senior sister said that you armament cultivators aren't suited to wear defensive spirit artifacts. Excessive protection will make you lose your sharpness. Lu Yi thought for a moment and nodded. Second senior sister's words make sense. Just as fourth senior brother Li Baxian had taught him before, if he couldn't experience danger and death at close range, how could armament cultivators improve themselves? Relying on external forces for protection would eventually lead to excessive dependence. Lu Ye's head sank and he turned to look. His expression darkened. What are you doing? This woman actually patted his head. Hua Xi revealed a gentle smile like an elder sister. Nothing, I just suddenly realized that this is pretty good. Lu Yi lowered his eyes. Didn't anyone tell you that you can't touch a man's head casually? No. Hua Xi looked at him matter-of-factly. What will happen if I touch it? Lu Ye's gaze became fierce. It's starting. Hua Xi's expression suddenly became serious, and she raised her hand to press on the divine pillar. Lu Yi glared at her hatefully and unwillingly placed his hand on the pillar. The divine pillar surged and the surrounding scenery distorted. The faint sound of waves reached their ears. When everything around them stabilized again, the two found themselves in a strange land. Exchanging a glance, they immediately became vigilant. The next moment, Lu Yi saw two figures not far away. When Lu Yi saw them, the other party also looked over. When their eyes met, both of them wore vigilant looks as they secretly circulated their spirit qi. Lu Yi looked at the auras of the other two and found that they were both seventh-order cultivators. Not only that, the battle marks on the back of their hands were emitting a faint red light, while Lu Ye's and Hua Xi's marks were glowing blue. Myriad Demon Ridge. Good start. Of the two people on the other side, a young man in tight robes laughed and rushed forward, apparently feeling quite lucky to have run into two sixth-order masters on his first try. Behind him, the other seventh-order cultivator reminded lightly, "Don't be careless." As he spoke, his spiritual energy surged, and a golden light shot out from his hand, attacking Lu Yi and Hua Xi. As soon as they met, he launched an attack. Hua Xi leapt to the side while Lu Yi lowered his body and rushed forward. The golden light hit the beach and blasted open a hole. The distance between them was not far to begin with, but as Lu Yi and the young man collided, they quickly closed the gap. Lu Ye's arrogant attitude undoubtedly angered the young man, causing him to draw his long sword and thrust it towards him, preparing to teach Lu Yi a lesson. His long sword flashed like a snake flicking its tongue, giving off a powerful aura. Lu Yi unsheathed his blade, and a fiery red blade light flashed. With a clanking sound, the young man's expression changed abruptly, because the power of this blade was incomparably great, almost causing his long sword to fly out of his hand. Is this guy a body cultivator or a weapon cultivator? The sword-wielding young man was puzzled, but his movements were not slow as he gripped his long sword tightly and displayed his full strength. Clanging sounds rang out and sparks flew as the two figures engaged in a fierce battle, but the expressions on their faces were different. Lu Ye's expression remained calm while the sword-wielding young man became more and more shocked, because this sixth-order boy, he thought he could easily crush, was actually displaying extraordinary combat power. He was surprised to find that he was not his opponent at all. The speed and strength of his opponent's attacks far exceeded his own, and after only a few moments of confrontation, he was already at a complete disadvantage. Every time they collided, his sword would howl in pain and his hand would ache. Is this really a sixth order? The sword-wielding young man seriously suspected that his opponent was wearing some kind of spirit artifact to conceal his cultivation and was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. However, the rules of Heaven's secret were unquestionable. Since they had appeared in this place, the enemy they encountered should not be stronger than them. After another 3 breaths, the sword-wielding young man felt that he could not hold on any longer, the hand between his thumb and index finger cracking and bleeding profusely. Not daring to hesitate any longer, he quickly took out a golden body talisman and pushed his spirit chi to slap it on his body. This action of his undoubtedly made his weakness even greater. Most weapon cultivators would not use their spirit artifacts in battle because it would affect their own rhythm. Lu Yi raised the mountain blade in his hand, and with a loud clang, the sword in the sword-wielding young man's hand flew out. The sword-wielding young man let out a cry of surprise as he was sent flying backwards. The golden body talisman on his body, which had just taken effect, had completely dimmed as it was directly shattered by the blade. Lu Yi chased after him and swung his blade towards the flying young man's body. While his heart was filled with shock, a look of satisfaction flashed across his eyes. Forming a seal with one hand, the young man's spirit chi surged as he shouted, "Die!" The flying sword immediately turned into a stream of light and fell straight down from the sky, arriving at Lu Ye's back in the blink of an eye. Blood splashed as the sword-wielding young man's eyes filled with panic as a foot-long cut appeared on his body from his crotch. At the same time, Lu Yi was also hit by the flying sword and fell to the beach, his back in pain. Having learned his lesson from the previous incident in Ing Mountain, how could he not be on guard against his opponent's artifact manipulation technique? While his opponent was using artifact manipulation, Lu Yi had constructed a defensive spirit inscription on his back. After a cultivator reached the 7th order, they could cultivate the artifact manipulation technique. On one hand, it would lay the foundation for future artifact manipulation technique, and on the other hand, it would give them an additional means to kill their enemies. Under artifact manipulation, the spirit artifact in one's hand could erupt with even greater power. Hurriedly getting up, the sword-wielding young man was not completely dead yet. Lu Yi flipped the mountain blade in his hand and stabbed it into his chest. When he pulled out the blade, blood spurted out. Without stopping for a moment, Lu Yi rushed towards the Fa Xiao, leaving a series of deep footprints on the wet beach. Fa Xiao used his spirit arts to bombard Hua Xi, putting her in an extremely difficult situation. He thought that his companion would be able to deal with Lu Yi, but the result shocked him. His 7th-order companion had been killed by a 6th-order brat. Idiot! The FA was furious. He did not see clearly what happened just now and only felt that his companion had underestimated the enemy too much. Otherwise, how could a 7th-order lose to a 6th-order? Chapter 185. Seeing Lu Yi rushing towards him, the spell cultivator no longer cared about Huasi. The golden light in his hand changed direction and blasted towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi's figure flickered as he dashed forward. It looked like he was barely dodging his opponent's techniques, but he was actually doing it with ease. His eyesight could see the traces of the techniques that were as fast as the wind, and his movements could follow the instructions given by his mind. As a result, unless it was a technique that covered a large area or was extremely fast, it would be very difficult to hit him. After 3 breaths, the spell cultivator's eyes were filled with shock. That was because the guy rushing towards him had perfectly dodged every one of his techniques. He hurriedly retreated, and at the same time, his spirit energy surged wildly. A large mass of golden light quickly gathered in front of his chest. From the looks of it, he seemed to be about to cast a powerful technique. At that moment, a jade-green arrow-like attack came from the side. The spell cultivator's attention was completely focused on Lu Yi, so he was completely unprepared for this attack. He was hit so hard that he staggered, and the hastily gathered spiritual energy dissipated. Huasi had made her move. She was a medical cultivator, but that didn't mean she didn't have the ability to fight. As a rogue cultivator, if she didn't have the ability to fight, she would have died long ago. While she was a medical cultivator, she was also a spell cultivator. However, she didn't know many techniques, so they weren't very powerful. This dark green technique didn't have much killing power, but its effect was very obvious. The 7th-order spell cultivator's technique was interrupted. Seeing that Lu Yi was already in front of him, he could only urge the golden light from before to bombard Lu Yi again. Lu Yi's figure flickered, and he easily dodged the attack. The mountain coiling saber slashed down, and a dazzling saber light flashed. The golden light condensed on the spell cultivator's body shattered, and a scream rang out. A huge wound appeared on his chest, and he staggered back. Lu Yi was like a maggot in a tarsal bone. He followed closely and stabbed forward. Under the enhancement of the sharpness spirit inscription, the originally heavy saber light became sharp. The saber pierced through the heart and came out from the back. The cultivator raised his hand and gripped the blade. His eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, he finally understood that his companion had died not because of carelessness, but because the enemy was too strong. Lu Yi pulled out his blade, and a few severed limbs flew up along with blood. The spell cultivator's body swayed on the spot and fell to the ground. A large amount of blood gushed out from his body. His eyes were wide open, and he died with remaining grievances. When Lu Yi got close enough, with just 2 slashes, a 7th-order Dharma cultivator was killed. This was much easier than killing a weapon cultivator, but it was not easy to kill an Dharma cultivator. At the same level of cultivation, it was very difficult for a weapon cultivator to get close to an Dharma cultivator. Lu Yi had suffered such a loss when his cultivation was not high. But now, it was almost impossible for a spell cultivator of the same level to hurt him. Once he got close to them, they wouldn't have a good ending. 2 red lights flew out one after another and landed on the back of Lu Yi's hand. Looking down, he found that his merit points had increased by 28 points. There were also some other things in his mark. Carefully examining them, he found that they were the blessings of the Heaven's Fate Pillar. Every sect that entered this place had a 500 merit points as a bargaining chip. Killing them would allow Lu Yi to take this bargaining chip. As long as Lu Yi could return to the Blue Blood sect alive, he could choose to place these blessings in his own Heaven's Fate Pillar to increase the aura of his base. Alternatively, he could exchange them for a corresponding number of sect merit points. Sect merit points were different from individual merit points, but the two could be exchanged to a certain extent. Therefore, over the years, every spirit stream garrison battle was a grand event for all the sects of the 9 states. Because of the balance of the heavens' fate pillar, both large and small sects were keen to participate in such a grand event. "Are you okay?" Lu Yi turned his head to look at Hua Xi. There were no obvious external injuries, but her face was covered in dust. Hua Xi shook her head. Although her cultivation was lower than the 7th-order Dharma cultivator, it would not be easy for him to kill her. The spirit artifact that her second senior sister had given her had greatly increased her defensive power. Together, they collected their spoils of war and began to investigate the surrounding terrain. A moment later, the two of them stood at the highest point and looked around. They found that this was a small island. The area was not big, only about the size of a square. The vegetation on the island was very dense, but it was surrounded by seawater in all directions. In such a narrow terrain, it was impossible for anyone else to hide. In other words, other than them, there were only the 2 myriad Demon Ridge cultivators who had been killed earlier. The aura on the island was rich, almost the same as in the wilderness of the Spirit Stream battlefield. It was convenient to cultivate and recover after a battle. The Chess Sea. Lu Yi exhaled lightly and confirmed the location of this Spirit Stream garrison battle. The small spaces in every Spirit Stream garrison battle were different. According to the incomplete statistics of the various sects of the 9 states, there were as many as 34 kinds of small spaces that had appeared in the Spirit Stream garrison battle. There were forests, deserts, swamps, plains, and even seas. The Chess Sea was one of the most famous small spaces. This was because there were small islands scattered all over the vast sea, just like chess pieces. The key was that these small islands were not fixed. They were constantly floating in the sea. As time passed, they would constantly merge with other small islands. Eventually, the small islands would become medium islands, and the medium islands would become large islands. In the end, all the islands would merge into one place, turning into a continent. This was an extremely mysterious place, but it was not a friendly place for the cultivators participating in the Spirit Stream garrison battle. If it were any other terrain, the cultivators who were unable to fight could choose to escape to the periphery, find a suitable place to hide, and wait for the Spirit Stream garrison battle to end. However, the Chess Sea was different. As the small islands continued to merge, it was destined that the cultivators of different camps would clash and kill each other. Moreover, the Chess Sea contained all kinds of dangers, among which were ferocious and huge sea monsters. Therefore, hiding in the sea was not advisable. Moreover, before the small islands were completely merged, they could not take the risk of flying. That was because flying over the sea would consume an extremely large amount of spirit energy. It was possible that they would run out of spirit energy before they could fly too far. Therefore, in the Chess Sea, even the garrison envoys from the core circle could not take the initiative to attack. Everyone could only obediently wait for the small islands to merge with the others. If the casualty rate of the Spirit Stream garrison battle were to be ranked according to the different small spaces, the Chess Sea would definitely be in the top 3. Lu Yi did not know what other cultivators would think after knowing that this place was the Chess Sea, but when he and Hua Xi looked at each other, they could see the joy in each other's eyes. "I'm going to plant some mushrooms," Hua Xi said as she walked towards the center of the small island with a happy expression. Since he was going to participate in the Spirit Stream garrison battle together with Hua Xi, they naturally had some understanding of each other. They were also clear about each other's killing and self-defense method. Hua Xi did not have many killing methods, and it was very difficult for her to kill a strong enemy in a very short period of time like Lu Yi. However, if she was given enough time and space to arrange things, she would be able to display a strength far beyond the 6th order. Planting mushrooms was her most powerful method. Previously in Ing Mountain, Hua Xi had unknowingly planted mushrooms in the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge. If Lu Yi had arrived a few days later, Huasi would have had the ability to kill the 3 cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge by herself. Moreover, she would have been able to kill them without them knowing. However, because of Lu Ye's arrival, Huasi could only hastily activate an incomplete method. Even so, it was enough to throw the 7th Order cultivator's mind into chaos. After learning about Huasi's ability, Lu Yi was secretly shocked. Who would have thought that a medical cultivator whose duty was to heal the wounded and heal the dying would actually have such a strange method? This also gave him a new understanding of medical cultivators, especially medical cultivators who grew up in the wild like Huasi. They might look gentle and kind on the surface, but in fact they might have the ability to wipe out entire cities and destroy entire nations. It could be said that the small space of the chess sea was extremely friendly to cultivators like Huasi. It was also the most suitable place for her to display her abilities. This was Lu Ye's luck. Before coming in, he did not know that the Spirit Stream garrison battle would be held in the chess sea. Huasi was busy. Not only was she planting mushrooms, but she was also collecting medicinal herbs. The world energy in the chess sea was extremely dense, suitable for the growth of medicinal herbs. Even if the cultivators did not kill their enemies, collecting medicinal herbs here would still be a source of income. Lu Yi stood guard at the side. The island was only so big that he could see the end of it at a glance, so it was not difficult for him to be on guard. However, he could indeed sense that the island was drifting towards a certain direction at a fast speed. He was very curious as to how the island was floating on the sea. This thing was not a ship, so it could not be empty underneath. Suddenly, the battlefield imprint reacted. Lu Yi checked it and found that it was a message from his 4th senior brother, Li Baxian. As the vice protector of Pill Heart sect, Li Baxian had naturally come to participate in the Spirit Stream garrison battle. He was also in the chess sea, but he was definitely at the very center. In the message, Li Baxian told him all kinds of information about the chess sea. At the end, he warned, "Little junior brother, do what you can. Do not try to be brave." Lu Yi replied and thanked him. Huasi had already made the necessary arrangements. Since he had nothing to do, Lu Yi simply switched to his secret art and began to cultivate. There would not be any danger here before it merged with the other islands. 2 hours later, Huasi suddenly called out to him. Lu Yi stopped cultivating and rushed to the highest point. Standing next to Huasi, he followed her gaze and saw a small black dot moving towards them. The other island was drifting over. Or rather, the 2 islands were attracting each other and moving closer to each other. They were still quite far away, so he could not see the situation clearly for the time being. He also did not know if there were any enemies there. The sea breeze whistled, filling his nose and mouth with a fishy and salty smell. Lu Yi silently estimated that at this speed, the 2 islands would collide in less than an hour. After some thought, Lu Yi put away the mountain pan saber strapped to his waist into his storage pouch and stood next to Huasi. When the distance between the 2 islands reached a certain point, they suddenly sped up, as if there was some attraction between them. At this distance, Lu Yi could also see the situation on the other island. There were also 2 people standing on a high point, looking in his direction. Chapter 186. They sized each other up and determined each other's cultivation. There were 2 7th-order cultivators on the opposite side. They had sabers and swords at their waists and looked like weapon cultivators. Before they got close, one of the thinner cultivators shouted, "Fellow Taoists, which camp are you from?" "We're from Grand Heaven Alliance." They were not far away yet, so the battlefield marks on the back of each other's hands did not react. However, if they were close enough, the camp they belonged to would be clear at a glance. For example, when Lu Yi and Huasi first came here, the battlefield marks on the back of their hands shone faintly when they met 2 Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators. This was the rule of the Spirit Creek garrison battle. It was convenient to confirm each other's positions. Lu Yi looked at him expressionlessly and did not answer. The thin cultivator said again, If it's convenient for you, fellow Taoist, you might as well show us your battlefield marks to avoid accidental injuries. Lu Yi silently circulated her spiritual energy and raised her hand. A fat firebird flapped its wings and flew over. Hua Xi was stunned by the sight of this somewhat bloated firebird. Only then did she follow up with a dark green arrow-like spell. It was the first time she saw Lu Yi use a spirit art. Moreover, it was in this form. If it were not for the inappropriate situation, she would have laughed out loud. Only now did she know why Lu Yi put away his saber just now, or the two spirit arts blasted toward the opposite side one after the other. It was not that Lu Yi saw through the other party's lies. It was just that the other party had ulterior motives. In the 9 continents, in the Spirit Creek battlefield, when unfamiliar cultivators met, they would not easily reveal their positions. This was common sense. The other party claimed to be from Grand Heaven Alliance as soon as they opened their mouth. Who knew if they were from Grand Heaven Alliance or not? Moreover, even if they were really from Grand Heaven Alliance, it was fine. After the two islands merged, they could just apologize to the other party. However, if the other party was from Myriad Demon Ridge, then they would be attacking Myriad Demon Ridge. Taking the initiative to attack was nothing more than taking the initiative. Spirit energy exploded. The thin cultivator who shouted was furious. "How dare you sneak attack us? I think you're tired of living." Although they said so, their movements were not idle. Both of them were moving and dodging. Whether it was Lu Ye's Fire Phoenix technique or Hua Xi's Green Arrow technique, their power wasn't great, and their speed wasn't fast either. As long as there was a certain distance between them, it wasn't difficult to dodge them. While the two sides were fighting happily, the distance between them was quickly closing. Perhaps they felt that it was too embarrassing to be beaten like this without fighting back. After a short discussion, the two opposite cultivators reached into the storage pouches at their waists and took out spirit talismans. They activated the power of the spirit talismans and attacked Lu Yi and Hua Xi. For a moment, the surface of the sea was extremely lively. Firebirds, green arrows, golden arc slash, and icicles shuttled back and forth, exchanging blows. While fighting back, the skinny cultivator grinned maliciously. "Two little sixth-order cultivators, just you wait, I'll show you what's good for you." As soon as he finished speaking, the bodies of the 4 people from both sides shook as the 2 small islands collided. Lu Yi and Hua Xi swayed left and right in tacit understanding, looking extremely miserable. The 2 opposite weapon cultivators, however, quickly stabilized their bodies. Exerting strength in their legs, they quickly rushed toward the 2 from the left and right. As the distance closed, the marks on the back of the 4 people's hands gradually glowed. The back of the 2 cultivators' hands were glowing red. They weren't from Grand Heaven Alliance, they were from Myriad Demon Ridge. "You're dead." The skinny cultivator's voice was cold. After dodging a few of Lu Ye's techniques, he had already closed in on them. The other cultivators stared at Hua Xi, who immediately abandoned Lu Yi and fled in panic. "Ha ha!" This scene made the skinny cultivator laugh, as if he was appreciating the scene of a husband and wife, who were birds in the same forest flying away in different directions in the face of disaster. After dodging another technique, the skinny cultivator leaped high and unsheathed the long sword at his waist. There was an expression of victory on his face. His cultivation was 1 order higher than his opponent's, and he was able to close in on a cultivator. Then, he saw Lu Yi reach into his storage pouch and take out a long saber. The skinny cultivator suddenly felt a little uneasy. When Lu Yi drew his saber and the saber flashed, the uneasiness instantly climbed to the extreme and turned into panic. With a clang, the long sword was sent flying. The skinny cultivator, who was in mid-air and had no leverage, could only watch as the long saber in Lu Ye's hand was covered in fiery red spirit energy. The entire saber seemed to be burning as it slashed down a second time. The skinny cultivator screamed as blood spurted out from his body. He was knocked to the side and one of his arms flew off. Only then did he realize that this sixth-order youth wasn't a cultivator at all. He was also a weapon cultivator. But how could a weapon cultivator cast spells so quickly? It wasn't that he didn't suspect this just now, but the speed at which the other party cast spells dispelled his doubts. It was impossible to cast spells so quickly without a long period of practice. What a treacherous little thief! The skinny cultivator cursed in his heart. He formed a seal with his remaining hand and pushed his spirit energy madly. The long sword that flew out buzzed and trembled before turning into a stream of light. However, before he could urge this stream of light, a saber light flashed in his field of vision, and his vitality quickly faded away. It had only been 3 breaths of time since he rushed towards Lu Yi. After Lu Yi beheaded this person, he lifted his foot and chased after him. There, another cultivator was chasing after Hua Ci. Although Hua Ci wasn't slow, she was still no faster than a weapon cultivator. Just as he was about to be caught, a scream came from behind him, startling him. When he turned his head to look back, he saw Lu Yi aggressively charging towards him. "Is my companion dead? How did he die? Also, isn't this boy a cultivator? Why is he holding a saber in his hand?" At this moment, one difficult question after another popped up in his mind. He hesitated for a moment between turning around to face the enemy and continuing to chase. Before he could make a decision, he suddenly felt dizzy. Under his feet, a gray mushroom burst, and spores that were almost imperceptible to the naked eye lingered around his body and were sucked into his lungs. Although he didn't know what had happened, he instinctively pushed his spirit chi and dispelled the uncomfortable feeling. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yi had already rushed in front of him. Facing the saber slash, the cultivator could only meet it head-on. Clanging sounds rang out as spirit artifacts collided and sparks flew everywhere. Hua Ci, who was running away, stopped running and turned around. Spirit energy surged around her body, and as she did so, the spirit energy around the 7th Order Realm cultivator's body began to dim. Lu Yi felt that his opponent's attacks were getting weaker and weaker. At the beginning of the fight, his opponent's performance was no different from other 7th Order cultivators, but after 2 moves, his opponent's strength seemed to be greatly suppressed and his spirit chi fluctuations were on par with Lu Ye's. He could even kill a 7th Order cultivator, let alone a 6th Order cultivator. He wanted to see Hua Ci's methods, so he didn't kill him and just kept pestering him. After a while, his opponent's spirit chi fluctuations dropped again, falling to the level of a 5th Order cultivator. Not only that, but what happened in the Ing Mountains happened again. Small mushrooms began to grow out of the cultivator's 7 orifices, looking extremely terrifying. The opponent obviously realized that something was wrong. After forcing Lu Yi back with 1 move, he stood still in a panic and gritted his teeth. "What have you done? Is this your limit?" Lu Yi looked at Hua Ci and asked. "That's about it. Then let's kill him." "Should I?" "And killing one will give you 14 merit points. My hands are used to save the dying and heal the injured, not to kill," Hua Ci said, feeling wronged. "I'll fight you to the death." The myriad Devil Ridge cultivator roared and rushed towards Lu Yi. Neither of the 2 enemies put him in their eyes, discussing the value of his life in front of him. No one could stand such humiliation. However, while he was rushing towards Lu Yi, the small mushrooms in his 7 orifices grew rapidly and then exploded. After a series of explosions, the man's face seemed to be corroded and he fell to the ground. 2 red lights floated towards Hua Ci and Lu Yi. The blood flowing out of this man's body wasn't a normal red, but more towards green. Hua Ci received merit points, while Lu Yi received the blessing of the Heaven's Fate Pillar. Lu Yi looked up at Hua Ci. The woman smiled kindly. "The mushrooms killed him, what does it have to do with me?" Lu Yi was speechless and collected the spoils. When he checked the battlefield mark, he found that this time, he didn't receive 1 blessing from the Heaven's Fate Pillar, but 2. In other words, These 2 myriad Demon Ridge cultivators had killed a group of people before and snatched the blessings of others, but now they were sent here. After realizing this, Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. In that case, the further he went, the greater the benefits he would receive from killing enemies. In the end, perhaps killing a group of people would give him unimaginable benefit. This was because as those who participated in the Battle of Spirit Creek continued to die, the blessings of the Heaven's Fate Pillar would gather on a small number of people. He checked the small island and found that the 2 small islands weren't really fused together. They were just like 2 pieces of magnets, firmly attached to each other and floating together in a certain direction. Hua Si-I happily walked towards the small island on the other side. She wanted to plant mushrooms there and turn all the small islands into undetectable traps. This way, no matter who dared to rush over, they wouldn't have a good ending. Lu Yi didn't follow. The enemies had been killed, so there was no danger there. He found that after the small island became larger, the world chi of heaven and earth also became denser. However, he didn't expend too much energy in the battle just now, so he only needed to rest a little. 2 hours later, Hua Si-I returned. She was humming a song and seemed to be in a good mood. The power of your mushrooms seems to have increased. Lu Yi asked the doubts in his heart. Back in the Ying Mountains, although Hua Si-I had planted mushrooms on that 7th-order cultivator, they weren't this powerful and didn't take effect so quickly. Second senior sister gave me some pointers, Hua Si-I explained. Lu Yi was surprised. Second senior sister knows about this? She doesn't, but she has experience and eyesight. It's not a problem for her to give pointers to a little cultivator like me. That's true. As if she saw through Lu Ye's thoughts, Hua Si-I smiled and said, Every medical cultivator is an expert in using poison. It's just a matter of whether they want to or not. If you don't understand poison, how can you treat people? In the future, when you meet those soft and cute medical cultivators, don't think that they are easy to bully. I never underestimate anyone, not my enemies. Chapter 187. 3 days later, the island that Lu Yi and Hua Si-I were on was 10 times bigger than the original island. During this period, they had merged with several other floating islands. Some of the islands had enemies, while others were empty. Lu Yi wanted to observe the pattern of the fusion between the islands, but in the end, he found that there was no pattern to speak of. 2 hours after they came here, they encountered the first island. After that, there was no movement for a long time. However, the second and third islands approached almost at the same time. At that time, Lu Yi and Hua Si-I were nervous. If there were enemies on both islands, then their situation might not be too good. The small islands that came later also suddenly appeared in his field of vision. There was no way to find the pattern. It was as if these small islands were drifting in the sea of chess. When they were close to each other to a certain distance, they would move closer to each other. After killing several groups of cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge and having the experience of working together for the first time, Lu Yi and Hua Si's cooperation became more and more skilled. Every time they encountered an enemy, the two of them would disguise themselves as spell cultivators and greet the other party with spells. If the other party was a weapon cultivator or a body cultivator, they would definitely rush forward. Every time this happened, Lu Yi would give the other party a surprise. However, there were exceptions. Previously, they encountered 2 spell cultivators who enthusiastically exchanged spells with Lu Yi and Hua Si for a long time. The 2 sides attacked each other with spells, and the fight was extremely lively. In the end, Lu Yi and Hua Si pretended to be unable to resist and fled back, leading the enemy over. When the enemy stepped into the mushroom area planted by Hua Si, the outcome was already decided. Once Hua Si's mushrooms were activated, the spore powder they emitted would invade the enemy's body. The spores, which were too small to be seen with the naked eye, were not fatal. They would only obscure the spiritual energy in the cultivator's body for a short period of time. As a result, the enemy's strength would be greatly reduced. At the same time, Those spores would also absorb the spiritual power in the enemy's body and grow in their 7 orifices. However, such a change in the body during a battle was undoubtedly very frightening. The mind would be in chaos, and the spiritual power would become obscure. Their strength would plummet, so how could they block Lu Ye's long saber? Search. It could be said that Hua Xi's method of killing enemies was very complicated. She was not as straightforward as Lu Yi, but it was extremely effective. However, the mushrooms she planted were not without their nemesis. The spiritual power of the fire element could restrain the spores that invaded her body. If someone knew about the trap she had set in advance and used a fire element spell to clean up the area, then all of her arrangements would be destroyed. Over the past 3 days, both of them had reaped some benefit. Although they had not gained much contribution points, they had gained quite a bit of support from the Tianji pillars. After the battle at Spirit Creek Garrison was over, if they could invest all of these support points into the garrison, the Ling Qi in the garrison would definitely improve significantly. Another battle was over. Lu Yi was covered in blood, some from his enemies, some from his own. He gasped for breath as he stood in a pool of blood. Beside him were the corpses of 4 Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators. This time, Lu Ye's luck wasn't too good. 2 people from the Myriad Devil Mountain range had met up. If it weren't for Hua Xi's arrangements, Lu Yi wouldn't have survived. Although he could kill enemies above his realm, he still had his limit. With his current cultivation, fighting 2 7th-order cultivators at the same time was already very difficult for him. Fighting 3 of them would be certain death. Hua Xi's mushrooms had made a great contribution. When the 2 saw that there were 4 people on the other side, they knew that they couldn't fight them head-on. Before the opposite island crashed into them, they didn't even bother to disguise themselves as cultivators and decisively retreated. The size of the island wasn't small, otherwise, they wouldn't have had any room to escape. Following this, 2 people fled while 4 people chased after them. After circling around the island several times, they were finally blocked. While the 4 people were laughing ferociously, Hua Xi used her own method. As she did so, the spirit qi of the 4 people suddenly became obscure and small mushrooms began to form. Lu Yi suddenly attacked and instantly killed one of them. What followed was a battle on the edge of life and death. Although Hua Xi's method worked, the explosive power of the 3 opponents still caused a lot of damage to Lu Yi. Even Hua Xi was hit by an imperial artifact. If it weren't for the spirit artifact dress given to her by second senior sister, her abdomen would have been pierced. After 10 breaths of time, the situation slowly improved because the strength of the enemies was rapidly declining. In the end, they couldn't even use their imperial artifact and were killed one by one. Turning his head to look at Hua Xi, Lu Yi saw blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. Although she was unharmed on the surface, the attack from the enemy's imperial artifact was obviously not something she could withstand. Lu Yi also had several wounds on his body, the most serious of which was so severe that his bones could almost be seen, but overall, he was fine. For eyes met, both of them still feeling lingering fear. Hua Xi stepped forward to treat Lu Ye's wounds. A warm, jade-green light enveloped Lu Yi, stopping the bleeding from his wounds. A numbing sensation continued to spread throughout his body. After reaching the 6th order, Hua Xi's healing ability had obviously improved. After some treatment, although the wounds wouldn't heal so quickly, they were no longer a problem. After dealing with Lu Ye's injuries, Hua Xi began to heal herself. Lu Yi swallowed a healing pill and a spirit accumulation pill, switching his secret art to restore himself while remaining vigilant. When he recovered, he didn't need to close his eyes and meditate like everyone else because the gluttonous meal was operating on its own, so after swallowing a spirit pill, he didn't need to worry about it. This was also the case when cultivating in the station. Others needed to concentrate on their cultivation and absorb the surrounding world energy. Once their state of mind relaxed, it would inevitably affect their cultivation efficiency, but Lu Yi only needed to construct spirit-gathering spirit runes in his spirit apertures and switch his secret art. He could even attend to other matters. However, under normal circumstances, he didn't have anything to do, so he spent most of his time in a daze or sleeping in the central area of the island, where he and Hua Xi had just appeared. He had already set up a large-scale spirit-gathering spirit rune. This was mainly for Hua Xi's recovery. Her recovery speed wasn't as fast as his, so it would be more efficient if she went there to recover after every battle. In a place where a great battle could break out at any time, it was undoubtedly necessary to maintain the abundance of one's spirit energy. In particular, Hua Xi's mushrooms consumed a lot of spirit energy. Those inconspicuous mushrooms were all produced by using her own spirit energy and some special methods. Now, as the island expanded, the places where she needed to plant mushrooms also increased. However, correspondingly, the density of the surrounding world energy was also increasing. Basically, after every battle, Hua Xi only needed to meditate for a moment to fully recover. As usual, Lu Yi collected the spoils of war. In the previous battle, Lu Yi had received as many as 5 blessings from the 4 myriad Demon Ridge cultivators. It was obvious that these 4 had killed a lot of Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. These 4 people must be from 2 different sects. Lu Yi didn't know how they were so lucky to be together. He and Hua Xi had stayed here for a few days and hadn't met anyone from the Grand Heaven Alliance. After collecting their storage bags, Lu Yi dragged the corpses to the seaside and threw them there. These days, Lu Yi had been disposing of the corpses like this. After all, he didn't know how long he would stay on this island and the corpses would become rotten. When the corpses covered in blood fell into the sea, Lu Yi clearly saw countless shadows surging from the sea. In just an instant, the corpses turned into nothingness. Not even the bones were left. He had never seen clearly what those shadows were, but he knew that he couldn't go too deep into the chess sea. Otherwise, he would definitely die. The second corpse was thrown down and disappeared in the blink of an eye. It was the same for the third corpse. Just as Lu Yi picked up the fourth corpse, he suddenly frowned and looked at the sea in front of him. He didn't know when a piece of bone was floating on the sea. The shadows around the bone retreated. Lu Yi stared at the bone and recognized that it was hanging around the neck of the myriad Demon Ridge cultivator. He had seen it when he was searching the corpses and was sure that it wasn't a spirit artifact or a precious material, so he didn't pay attention to it. But now it seemed that this thing was a little unusual, because even the shadows under the sea were avoiding it. Lu Yi thought for a moment and put down the corpse in his hands. He lifted the man's lapel and pulled out something from his neck. It was also a piece of bone, the same as the thing floating on the sea. There was no reaction when he poured his spirit chi into it. He pinched it with his hand and found that it was very hard. He was sure that it wasn't a spirit artifact. What was this thing? He thought that the bone had some special meaning to the 2 people, so they each wore one. But now that he thought about it, it seemed that something was wrong. Because the 2 people wearing the bone didn't seem to be from the same sect. Lu Yi vaguely remembered that during the battle, the 2 people didn't cooperate with each other. Instead, they were inseparable. 2 people from different sects were wearing the same pendant. Was it a coincidence? He wasn't in a hurry to throw the corpses into the sea. Instead, he turned around and found a branch. He returned to the seaside and picked up the bone floating on the sea. Then, he dealt with the corpses. Without the bone floating on the sea, the shadows under the sea became active again. Holding the 2 bone pieces in his hand, Lu Yi returned to the highest point of the island and studied them while keeping a lookout. An hour later, Hua Xi, who had fully recovered, came up. Seeing the things in Lu Ye's hand, she asked curiously, "What is this?" Lu Yi shook his head and told her what he found. Hua Xi asked curiously, "You're saying that the 2 people from different sects each wore a pendant made of this bone?" And Lu Yi nodded and described the characteristics of the 2 people. Hua Xi thought carefully and said, They really don't seem to be from the same sect. Is it possible that they are actually blood-related brothers? This is their family's heirloom. This speculation was very likely. Who cares what it is? I'll bring it back and let second senior sister have a look, Lu Yi said and put the bone pieces into his storage bag. Hua Xi suddenly nudged him with her elbow and pointed in a direction. Lu Yi looked up and his gaze became serious. In that direction, there was a small island not inferior to theirs, and it was rapidly approaching. Chapter 188. The islands in the Chess Sea were small at first, only about the size of a square. However, as time passed and the islands were attached to each other, they would grow larger and larger. The larger the island was, the stronger the enemy might be, and the greater the number of enemies. This was because in the repeated elimination of the island, the weaker side or the side with fewer people had already been killed. Of course, there were exceptions. For example, Lu Yi and Hua Xi, who were both sixth order, occupied a large island. As the two islands approached each other rapidly, Lu Yi noticed some abnormalities on the other side. Someone seemed to be fighting on the opposite island. From time to time, the light of spells would light up from there. As they got closer and closer, the sounds of battle became more and more obvious. If there was a battle, it meant that there were not only Myriad Demons Ridge, but also Grand Heaven Alliance on the other side. However, he did not know what the situation was like. The other side was in full swing and obviously did not notice that the two islands were approaching each other. Perhaps he could take advantage of this. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and said to Hua Xi, "I'll go and take a look. You stay here. Be careful." Lu Yi urged his spirit energy and a pair of wings with fire spirit energy appeared on his back. He turned into a stream of light and flew toward the island in front of him. As soon as he flew out of the island and came to the surface of the sea, Lu Yi felt that the spiritual energy in his body was flowing out like a flood from a broken dam. The level of consumption was not much lower than that of maintaining a defensive spiritual tattoo of the same height. He was secretly shocked. Sure enough, he could not fly casually in the Chess Sea. Or rather, he could not fly on the sea. The consumption was too great. He did not know the reason. Fortunately, the two islands were not far away. After a few breaths, Lu Yi landed on the opposite island. He folded his wings and tried his best to suppress the flow of spirit energy in his body as he flew toward the battle. He did not have much time. The two islands were about to collide. At that time, the people here would definitely be alerted. Fortunately, the size of the island was not very big. After a while, Lu Yi arrived at the periphery of the battlefield. Looking around, he saw 5 Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators besieging 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. There were 3 corpses lying on the ground. It was obvious that the battle was fierce. Among the 5 Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators, 2 were Dharma cultivators, 1 was Physique cultivator, 1 was Weapon cultivator, and 1 was suspected to be a Ghost cultivator. The 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators, 1 male and 1 female, were covered in blood and wounds. It seemed that they would not be able to hold on for long. After all, it was 2 against 5, so they were definitely no match for them. They were able to survive until now because the male cultivator from the Grand Heaven Alliance was an individual cultivator. His body was tall and sturdy like an iron tower. His vitality was vigorous, and he was extremely resistant to beatings. He held a spirit artifact shield in his hand and blocked many attacks. The second reason was that the Myriad Demons Ridge was confident in their victory, so they didn't want to take too many risks. If they really forced the other party into a corner, the other party might have the means to perish together with them. At first, they didn't fight 5 against 2, but 6 against 4. After successfully killing one of them, one of his companions acted too hastily and ended up perishing together with a cultivator from the Grand Heaven Alliance. In the current situation, they only needed to trap the 2 and break the weapon cultivator's shield. Then, they would have no chance to resist. The 3 cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge gathered around the man and woman, constantly harassing them. The 2 Dharma cultivators stood a little further away. Under the premise that they wouldn't accidentally injure their companions, they constantly cast spells and bombarded the spirit artifact shield. The spirit light on the shield was extremely dim and could be annihilated at any time. Under such circumstances, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for the 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators to escape. Looking at their expressions, they clearly wanted to die. They didn't want to beg for mercy because they knew that it was useless. They would only be humiliated even more. Especially for female cultivators, if they fell into the enemy's hands, it would be a fate worse than death. They were now waiting for an opportunity, a chance to perish together with the enemy. The opportunity came instantly. With a boom, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The 2 islands collided and everyone lost their footing. The myriad Demons Ridge cultivators' expressions changed. They had encountered the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators more than an hour ago, so they didn't expect to encounter another island so soon. "Be careful," one of them shouted. The moment the 2 islands collided, 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators rushed towards the soldier cultivator. The body cultivator roared and waved his shield to protect the slim figure beside him. The determination and viciousness in their eyes made the soldier cultivator who was targeted panic for a moment. Ah! The scream didn't come from the targeted weapon cultivator, but from another direction. Everyone was shocked. A few myriad Demons Ridge cultivators looked in the direction of the voice and saw the tip of a blade protruding from the chest of a spell cultivator standing at the periphery of the battlefield. Behind the spell cultivator, there was a vague figure standing there unknowingly. How did they come so quickly? They were all shocked. When the islands collided, they realized that someone else might come. If it was the myriad Demons Ridge cultivators, it would be great. However, if it was the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators, there would be a change in the situation. What they didn't expect was that the moment the islands collided, one of their Dharma cultivators was killed. Could it be that the other party had been hiding nearby? They didn't have time to think as the battle had begun. The 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators had already rushed to the weapon cultivator from Myriad Demons Ridge. They didn't care about anything and were determined to drag him down with them. They almost succeeded. It was a pity that the 2 of them were severely injured. The targeted weapon cultivator was supported by the body cultivator from Myriad Demons Ridge. The 4 of them immediately engaged in battle. The ghost cultivator from Myriad Demons Ridge didn't stay idle either. His aura suddenly became erratic, and he charged into the battle from the side. For a moment, the 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators were surrounded by danger. At the same time, after Lu Yi finished off one of the Dharma cultivators, he exerted force in his legs and ran toward the second Dharma cultivator. At the same time, he shouted, "Hold on!" Hearing the voice, the body cultivator with the big shield didn't react. However, the female Dharma cultivator with the 2 short swords was shocked because she felt that the voice was a little familiar. However, she didn't have time to check the identity of the person at the moment. Purple veins had already crept up her fair neck. Even her eyes had turned purple. The purple veins were still creeping up, making her look both demonic and beautiful. Ghost cultivators were good at attacking and killing. This kind of head-on confrontation wasn't her strong suit. However, she had no other choice but to activate her strength with all her might. On the other side, Lu Yi moved nimbly and avoided the Dharma cultivator's attack. As the distance between them shortened rapidly, the Dharma cultivator's eyes revealed traces of fear. He had never seen a weapon cultivator with such nimble movement. Lu Yi easily dodged every one of his Dharma cultivators. Seeing that Lu Yi was about to pounce on him, the Dharma cultivator clenched his teeth. Spiritual energy surged from his body, and a powerful repulsive force swept out in all directions. Lu Yi staggered from the impact. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Dharma cultivator hurriedly closed in on the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. However, He had only taken a few steps when a scorching aura attacked him from the side. He turned his head and saw a large flaming bird flapping its wings. He hurriedly waved his hand and a spiritual energy barrier appeared in front of him. With a boom, the flaming bird slammed into the barrier. His spiritual energy exploded, and the impact caused his body to sway. Amidst the chaotic spiritual energy, Lu Yi brazenly charged forward with his saber. He raised his mountain saber and a fiery red saber light flashed. A forearm flew out and the Dharma cultivator's long saber pierced through his body. Amidst the Dharma cultivator's miserable screams, several bloody holes appeared on his body. Boom! Before the Dharma cultivator died, his Dharma cultivator's Dharma cultivator technique landed on Lu Ye's chest. However, it was blocked by the defensive spiritual inscriptions. The huge impact caused Lu Yi to fly out and fall to the ground. He hurriedly got up and looked over. The Dharma cultivator was already kneeling on the ground. A red light floated over from there. Lu Yi tilted his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. He had long since sworn that if he saw any Dharma cultivator he didn't like in the future, he would kill them first. Without any delay, he rushed towards the two Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators to support them without stopping. Perhaps Lu Ye's arrival gave them hope of survival, or perhaps their plan to perish together with their enemies had been foiled. At this moment, the man and woman were fighting as they retreated, drawing closer to Lu Ye's side. However, their injuries were too severe and they were fighting 2 against 3. It was obvious that they wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Along the way, they left bloody footprints. The attacks of the 3 myriad Devil Ridge cultivators became increasingly fierce. It wasn't until Lu Yi joined the battle that the situation stabilized. At this moment, the female cultivator finally knew who the newcomers were. She had complicated feelings. She never thought that they would meet again here. "Let's go," Lu Yi shouted as he waved his mountain saber to block an attack. Even with his addition, the situation was still at a disadvantage. If they continued fighting like this, Lu Yi wasn't afraid, but the 2 of them would definitely die. The female cultivator and the body cultivator were still hesitating. Lu Yi shouted again, "Let's go." The 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators didn't hesitate anymore. They immediately turned around and fled. The pressure on Lu Yi increased sharply. Fighting 3 enemies alone, all of whom were 7th order at that, was something even he couldn't resist. A defensive spiritual rune the size of a table appeared in front of Lu Yi. As Lu Ye's spiritual power was rapidly depleted, the attacks of the 3 people in front of him continued to land, causing cracks to appear all over the defensive spiritual rune. However, with the activation of spiritual power, the defensive spiritual rune was repaired, and the cycle repeated itself. After 3 breaths of time, Lu Yi couldn't hold on any longer. He felt his 5 viscera and 6 bowels trembling. The taste of blood filled his throat. As he removed the spirit rune, he swung his saber and forced the 3 cultivators to retreat. Then, he turned around and ran. By the time the 3 from the myriad Devil Ridge looked up again, Lu Yi had already run 10 feet away. They were shocked at how fast this kid was. The 3 of them simultaneously activated their Tao of weapon manipulation, and the 3 spirit weapons turned into streams of light that shot towards Lu Yi. Feeling the murderous intent behind him, Lu Yi soared into the sky without thinking. The fiery red wings on his back spread open. He didn't activate the spirit rune because he felt that he couldn't block it. Even if he couldn't block it, the huge impact would instantly injure him. Chapter 189. Madame Yun's flying wing tattoo on Lu Ye's back was of great help. Seeing Lu Yi soar into the sky, the 3 myriad Demon Ridge cultivators were stunned. They didn't expect Lu Yi to have such an ability. For a moment, Lu Yi, who was in the form of a red light, flew in front, while 3 different colored lights flashed behind him, leaving behind long streaks of light. Tattoo wasn't something every low-level cultivator could have. In the entire 9 provinces, there weren't many spirit tattoo masters, and those who could tattoo low-level cultivators were even fewer. It could be said that there were no more than 20 spirit tattoo masters in the entire 9 provinces cultivation world. Madame Yun was one of them. If it weren't for the sect master's face, she wouldn't have taken action so easily. Lu Yi flew a few dozen meters before the sense of danger behind him slowly dissipated. Looking back, the cultivator's spirit artifacts had been taken back. Obviously, Lu Yi had escaped from their attack range. There was a limit to how far a spirit artifact could kill an enemy. For these 7th order cultivators, 300 meters was the furthest they could go. Any further and their connection with their spirit artifacts would be cut off. Seeing Lu Yi escape, the 3 looked at each other and didn't know whether they should give chase or not. Lu Yi had killed 2 of their Dharma cultivators in a row just now, and his cultivation was exposed in front of them. He was just a 6th order cultivator, and the other 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators were also seriously injured. It could be said that the best choice now was to give chase and not give the enemy a chance to breathe. However, the opposite island was someone else's territory. It wasn't a good idea to give chase rashly. What if someone set a trap there? Not to mention anything else. As long as a few Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators were lying in ambush there, they would be in trouble. After a moment of hesitation, the 3 had a simple discussion and decided to have the ghost cultivators sneak in to investigate the situation. Among the 6 cultivation systems, ghost cultivators were the best at sneaking in and killing. However, because the cultivators Lu Yi encountered so far weren't high in cultivation, even if he encountered some ghost cultivators, their characteristics weren't obvious. When their cultivation wasn't high, ghost cultivators didn't look much different from weapon cultivators. Only when their cultivation was high enough would the advantages of ghost cultivators be slowly revealed. However, as everyone knew, ghost cultivators ran the fastest, so the responsibility of investigating the enemy's situation fell on the ghost cultivator. Even if he wasn't willing, he didn't have a better way to deal with it at the moment. Under the cover of his 2 companions, the ghost cultivator successfully sneaked into the island of Lu Ye's group. After investigating from a distance, he quickly brought back good news and bad news. The good news was that there was indeed another person there, but that person was also only a 6th order cultivator. At the moment, he was treating the 2 injured Heaven Alliance cultivators. Hearing this, the body cultivator and weapon cultivator were both stunned. They really couldn't figure out which sect's guardian and vice envoy were from. Both of them were 6th order cultivators, but there was also a medical cultivator among them. It must be known that even if medical cultivators could cultivate in other schools, they would have to spend a large amount of time studying medical technique. Therefore, medical cultivators were the weakest among cultivators of the same level. US of sect, and S of yes, S die B dies B's, S's of S's cultivator wait for their own people to be chopped into a dozen pieces and sewn up? Therefore, the 3 from the myriad Devil Ridge could not figure out which destitute sect this was. How could there be such a surprising operation? However, they knew that they couldn't wait any longer. The other party had a medical cultivator. Once the 2 heavily injured cultivators of the Grand Heaven Alliance were treated, they would recover their combat strength. By then, they would be fighting against 4 cultivators at the same time. They had to act as soon as possible. They couldn't give the 2 time to recover. After making up their mind, the 3 from Myriad Demon Ridge immediately set off for the opposite island. At the same time, they discussed letting the ghost cultivator entangle Lu Yi. They had a deep understanding of Lu Ye's methods. They knew that they couldn't treat him as an ordinary 6th order cultivator. They didn't expect the ghost cultivator to kill Lu Yi. As long as they could delay him, they would be able to deal with the 3 from Heaven Alliance. Then, even if Lu Yi could fly, he wouldn't be able to escape death. At the same time, Hua Ci, who was treating the 2 Heaven Alliance cultivators, looked up and glanced at Lu Yi. Lu Yi understood tacitly. "Are they here?" the body cultivator asked. "They're here." The body cultivator stood up with difficulty and carried his big shield spirit artifact. He sighed in his heart. In the end, he couldn't escape this disaster. He smiled at Lu Yi. I've implicated you. I'll try my best to stop them. The female cultivator also stood up with two short sabers in her hands. Although they were treated by Hua Xi, the time was too short. All Hua Xi could do was stop their bleeding. The female cultivator seemed to want to say something to Lu Yi, but in the end, she didn't say anything. Lu Yi slowly pulled out the long saber at his waist and said lightly, "Don't fight them. If they dare to come, this will be their burial ground." The body cultivator and the female cultivator were surprised. They didn't know where he got his confidence from. Although they had 4 people on their side, their chances of winning weren't high. My family's medical cultivator is very scary. After saying that, Lu Yi clenched the mountain saber in his hand. In his field of vision, the 3 people from the myriad Devil Ridge had already rushed over. Before they arrived, 3 streams of light had already flown over. The burly body cultivator shouted and stood in front of everyone. He stuck the spirit artifact shield in his hand on the ground and activated his spirit artifact. A thick barrier immediately appeared on the spirit artifact shield, blocking all 4 of them behind. Clanging sounds were heard. Every sound made the body cultivator's body tremble slightly. However, he stood still as if his feet were rooted to the ground. With the enemy's attack, the barrier of the spirit artifact shield began to shatter. However, Lu Yi and the female cultivator had already rushed out. One of the 2 short sabers in the female cultivator's hand flew out. She also used the spirit artifact Dao to attack her opponent, forcing the weapon cultivator from the myriad Devil Ridge to activate his own spirit artifact to block. At the same time, Lu Yi also activated a spell to attack the ghost cultivator. The scene was very lively for a moment, and spirit artifact waves rose and fell one after another. Hiding behind the spirit artifact shield, Hua Xi slowly raised her hand and activated her spirit artifact to form a seal. In the next moment, the expressions of the 3 people from the myriad Devil Ridge suddenly changed. The spirit artifact chi in their bodies suddenly became obscure and sluggish. This caused their strength to plummet, and the power of their attacks weakened significantly. Not only that, but the 3 of them felt as if something had drilled out of their 7 orifices, making it difficult for them to breathe and blocking their vision. As those things grew, their spirit artifact chi rapidly drained away. This scared the 3 of them quite a bit. Lu Yi had already rushed in front of the ghost cultivator. The saber in his hand slashed down and blood splattered. After 30 breaths of time, the battle ended as the body cultivator's spirit artifact shield smashed the body cultivator's head. Lu Yi sheathed his saber and Hua Xi's expression was calm. Only the body cultivator and the female cultivator looked at her with complicated expressions. Lu Yi had said that her family's medical cultivator was terrifying, but they didn't think too much about it. They only thought that how terrifying could a medical cultivator be? The world's understanding of medical cultivators had always been to save the dying and heal the injured. It was only at this moment that they understood that medical cultivators were truly terrifying. They didn't even see what had happened. They only knew that many small mushrooms had suddenly grown out of the 3 people from the myriad Devil Ridge while they were rushing over. Immediately after, their strength plummeted. Then, the 3 of them dealt with the 3 of them as if they were chopping melons and vegetables. They had never heard of such a strange method in this world. Their respective sects also had some medical cultivators, but none of them could be compared to the one beside them. The 2 of them faintly felt that this gentle female medical cultivator had probably obtained some fortuitous encounter or inheritance. Otherwise, there was no way she could have such terrifying abilities. "Heal your wounds," Lu Yi said and began to clean up the battlefield. Hua Xi looked at the 2 of them and asked softly, "Who's going first?" The body cultivator and the female cultivator looked at each other and said in unison, "Him." As if sensing something, Hua Xi smiled sweetly. Don't worry, I won't plant mushrooms on your bodies. The body cultivator scratched his head awkwardly. Junior Marshal Sister Lon, you go first. I can still hold on. While the three of them were healing their wounds, Lu Yi picked up the storage bags and spiritual tools on the ground. Then, he dragged the three corpses to the seaside and threw them into the sea. After that, he ran to another small island and cleaned up the things of the people he had killed before. He did the same to the corpses. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Lu Yi returned with a strange expression and something in his hand. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. The female cultivator had finished healing her wounds and was no longer in a serious condition. However, she still needed some time to recover. Senior Marshal Sister Lon. Lu Yi looked at her with a smile. We meet again. Although he had saved her before, he was pressed for time and didn't have time to catch up. This female cultivator was Lon Yudi from the Purple Cloud Mountain. More than 2 months ago, when Lu Ye's identity was exposed and countless cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge wanted to kill him, it was Lon Yudi who led the people from the Purple Cloud Mountain to find Lu Yi first. During that period of escape, Lu Yi had received the protection of many people, but the one who left the deepest impression on him was Lon Yudi. Firstly, she was the first to find him. Secondly, the two of them had spent the longest time together. Sometimes, the people who protected Lu Yi were forced to fight the cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge as soon as they came into contact with Lu Yi. In the end, when he separated from Lon Yudi, she and some people from the Big Dipper sect were besieged by the cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. However, Lu Yi took the initiative to expose his whereabouts and drew away many of the cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. After that, he sent a message to Lon Yudi and confirmed her safety. However, Lu Yi didn't expect to meet her during the battle at Lingxi. Since she was here, it meant that she was either a guardian or a deputy guardian. Many thanks for saving my life, Junior Marshal Brother, Lon Yudi said seriously. Lu Yi shook his head. If it weren't for Senior Marshal Sister's protection, I wouldn't be here today. Speaking of which, I should be the one thanking Senior Marshal Sister. Then we're even. Lon Yudi smiled slightly. Before Lu Yi could say anything, Hua Si, who was treating the body cultivator's wounds, blinked innocently. Didn't you tell me last time that I should repay a debt of gratitude with my body? Ah? Last time? Lon Yudi looked at Lu Yi in surprise. Lu Ye's face darkened. Ignore her. My family's medical cultivator likes to talk nonsense. Chapter 190. He then exchanged names with the body cultivator who was being treated. He was the guardian of an 8th-rank sect in Dingzhou. His name was Gao Tai. After learning Lu Ye's identity, Gao Tai was surprised. So you're Lu Ye from the Jade Blood sect. 2 months ago, the battle at Golden Light Peak caused quite a commotion. Lu Yi was too lazy to correct the way others addressed him. Some things had already been spread, so he couldn't deny it. Lon Yudi was the vice-guardian while Gao Tai was the guardian. Originally, there were 2 other people with them. However, in the battle with the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators, those 2 had died in battle. Their belongings were still in Lu Ye's hands. Lu Yi immediately asked them to identify their belongings and return their storage pouches. Although they had narrowly escaped death, the deaths of their companions made Lon Yudi and Gao Tai somewhat depressed. After talking with them for a while, Lu Yi learned that their luck was pretty good. They had met up at the beginning, and then the 4 of them joined forces and killed a few Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. That was until they met those people from before. There were 4 of them, while the other side had 6. In a situation where their cultivations were about the same, the other side clearly had the upper hand. If Lu Yi hadn't suddenly appeared, the 2 of them would have died. Do you 2 recognize this? Lu Yi asked as he tossed a bone fragment to each of them. Lon Yudi and Gao Tai caught it and inspected it. They shook their heads. Lon Yudi asked, "What is this?" "I don't know." Lu Yi played with the other 2 bone fragments in his hand. "I found it over there." He had collected 2 bone fragments before, and when he went to clean up the battlefield, he actually found 2 more. One was from the body of the spell cultivator he killed in a sneak attack, and the other was from the corpse of another myriad Devil Ridge cultivator. This person had been killed before Lu Yi came, and it was one of the 3 corpses lying on the ground. When he told them about his discovery, Lan Yudi and Gao Tai both revealed surprised expressions. "You're saying that you found these bone fragments from 4 different sects? If those 2 people weren't from the same sect, then they were from 4 different sects. What exactly is this?" Lan Yudi poured her spiritual power into it, but there was no reaction. She pinched it with all her might, but there was still no reaction. She even used her short knife to cut it a few times, but it didn't break. "I've never seen it before. Perhaps it's a spirit material that we don't recognize," Gao Tai guessed. "But why would it appear in the bodies of people from the 4 different sects?" Lan Yudi saw the problem. Lu Yi also wanted to know the reason, but she couldn't find an answer. Previously, Hua Xi had guessed that the 2 myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were related by blood. But now, it seemed that this guess wasn't reliable. It didn't make sense that all 4 of them were related by blood. Moreover, they had joined 4 different sections. In the end, he could only put it aside for now. He planned to ask 4th Senior Brother. 4th Senior Brother was experienced and knowledgeable, so he should have some clues. After letting Lan Yudi and Gao Tai recover from their injuries, Lu Yi remained vigilant while sending a message to her 4th Senior Brother. As for Hua Xi, she ran out to plant more mushrooms. The island wasn't too big, so she could still control it. However, if the island was too big, she wouldn't be able to plant mushrooms everywhere. She could only concentrate them in a certain area. 4th Senior Brother didn't reply for the time being. Lu Yi guessed that he might be fighting with someone. Lu Yi wasn't worried about that. Over the past few days, he had gained a better understanding of the cultivation world. He knew about the Spirit Stream list, and that 4th Senior Brother was an expert ranked 10th on the list. It was said that the guardian of the Pillheart sect was a monster ranked 1st on the list. With the 2 of them together, there were very few people in the Chess Sea who could pose a threat to them. After waiting for a while, the imprint replied, "I was fighting with someone just now. Little Junior Brother, what's the matter?" 4th Senior Brother's tone was relaxed. The person who fought with him obviously didn't have a good ending. Lu Yi described his discovery in detail and asked 4th Senior Brother about the bone fragment. Unexpectedly, before he could describe it in detail, 4th Senior Brother had already told him about the characteristics of the bone fragment. "Senior Brother, you have one too?" Lu Yi was surprised. "I just found one." Lu Yi suddenly had a bad feeling. He was at the periphery of the Chess Sea, while 4th Senior Brother was at the center of the Chess Sea. The fact that the same bone fragment had appeared on the bodies of different myriad Devil Ridge cultivators and in different locations in the Chess Sea clearly indicated something. "What exactly is this thing? I've never seen it before. I'll go ask someone and let me know if I have any result." "Okay." After ending the communication with 4th Senior Brother, Lu Yi rubbed the bone fragment in his hand. After thinking for a while, he put it in his storage bag. 4 hours later, another small island floated over. It wasn't as big as Lu Ye's island and seemed to have only merged a few times. However, after attaching themselves to each other, Lu Yi found that they were cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance. There were only 2 of them, and both of them were injured. It seemed that they had been through a fierce battle. When they met up with each other, they were overjoyed to find out that there was a medical cultivator on Lu Ye's side. They had originally planned to fight to the death. After all, in their current state, they definitely wouldn't have a good ending if they encountered cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge. They didn't expect that they would be so lucky. Not only did they encounter cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance, but they also encountered a medical cultivator who could save lives and heal the injured. Hua Xi treated their injuries, and the 2 of them were naturally grateful. As a result, There were now 6 cultivators gathered on the small island. Everyone felt much safer now. Even if they were to encounter a group of Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators, they would still be able to put up a fight. Moreover, if they were to encounter a group of Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators, who knew which side would have more people? At the same time, fierce battles broke out on the small islands of different sizes in the entire Chess Sea. Every battle ended with the complete annihilation of one side. Looking at the situation in the entire Chess Sea, there was no doubt that the Myriad Devil Ridge had the absolute advantage because many cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge had gathered together. On the other hand, there were not many cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance who could meet up with their own camp. Most of them encountered cultivators who were hostile to them. Even if they won this battle, there would be another battle waiting for them. As the cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge continued to gather, they could often form a situation where they outnumbered the enemy. In this way, the Grand Heaven Alliance suffered even more casualties. Once they encountered the enemy, they basically didn't have much power to resist. Half a day later, a great battle broke out. There were 6 people on the Grand Heaven Alliance's side and 6 people on the other side. Their numbers were equal, but on the surface, the Grand Heaven Alliance's side was obviously at a disadvantage. Lu Yi and Hua Xi were 2 sixth-order cultivators, and the remaining 4 were all injured. Even with Hua Xi's treatment, it would still take them a few days to recover. After a short probing confrontation, Lu Yi and the others were defeated and retreated to the back of the island. Seeing this, the 6 cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge chased after them with great momentum. In the end, the ground was littered with chicken feathers. When these 6 people stepped into the mushroom area planted by Hua Xi, they were doomed to die. Even though they had seen such a scene before, Lan Yudai and Gao Tai were still a little uncomfortable. The 2 cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance who saw such a scene for the first time were even more horrified. Fortunately, although they were horrified, they didn't show any mercy. In this great battle, it could be said that everyone had gained something, and they were all smiling. They were already grateful to Hua Xi, so their expressions became even more amiable. In such a place, it was really reassuring to have a medical cultivator at the back, not to mention that this medical cultivator had a strange method to weaken the enemy. It could be said that Hua Xi had contributed greatly to this battle being won so easily. After the battle, no one took the spoils, and they all handed it over to Hua Xi. For them, being able to kill the enemy and obtain merit points and the support of the Heaven's Fate Pillar was already a great profit. Who would have the nerve to share the spoils? Hua Xi naturally refused, but the others refused so fiercely that she could only accept it with a smile. After this great battle, they also realized Hua Xi's importance. After discussing with Lu Yi, they finally decided that in the future, one person would be assigned to protect Hua Xi in every battle. This really made Lu Yi feel what it meant to be treated differently. However, he was also happy to see this. After all, Hua Xi's strength was a little weak, so she would be safer if someone was assigned to protect her. After the great battle, they naturally recovered. At this moment, a message came. Lu Yi checked it and found that it was from 4th senior brother. Hurry up and throw away those bone pieces. Those things can affect the chess islands in the Chess Sea. The chess islands of the people with the bone pieces will be attracted to each other. The people of the Myriad Demons Ridge are constantly gathering with the help of these bone pieces. Haotian Alliance is going to suffer in this battle of Spirit Creek. Seeing this message, Lu Yi could not help but be stunned. He had felt that those bone pieces were a little strange, but he did not expect them to have such a wonderful effect. According to 4th senior brother's message, these bone pieces could actually affect the chess islands in the Chess Sea. The chess islands of the people with the bone pieces would be attracted to each other and eventually gather together. This way, the people of the Myriad Demons Ridge would grow stronger like a rolling snowball. Combining all the things that he had encountered before, Lu Yi immediately judged that 4th senior brother should be right. The 4 bone pieces that he had obtained belonged to different forces of the Myriad Demon's Ridge, but they could gather together in the chess sea. There might be an element of luck involved, but it was very likely that the bone pieces had an effect on the chess island. If that was the case, then Hautian Alliance was really going to suffer in this battle of Spirit Creek. Where did this bone piece come from? Has it never appeared before? Lu Yi sent a message to ask. It seems to have been accidentally discovered by a sect of the Myriad Demon's Ridge in the chess sea a few decades ago. It was the remains of a powerful sea demon beast. After they brought it back, the people of the Myriad Demon's Ridge somehow found a way to use the remains and polished it into bone pieces. They took advantage of this battle of Spirit Creek to distribute it to various sects, big and small. Fourth senior brother hurriedly replied, "Little junior brother, you must be careful. Try to team up with other people of the Hautian Alliance as much as possible. Hold on until all the chess islands merge. I'll look for you then. I'm not in much danger here." "Be careful, senior brother," Lu Yi replied. After ending the message with Li Baxian, Lu Yi frowned. The Myriad Demon's Ridge had definitely come prepared this time. Before this, the news of these bone pieces had not been spread. It was only when the Battle of Spirit Creek began that the Myriad Demon's Ridge suddenly launched an attack. Obviously, they had been planning this for a long time. The Great Sage of Human Tao. However, the maintenance staff will correct the content of the chapter within 2 minutes after you submit it. Please wait patiently. Chapter 191. Perhaps the Myriad Demon Ridge had prepared this in the past, but because the terrain wasn't the chess sea, the bone fragments didn't play a role. The bone fragments weren't spirit materials, so even if the cultivators of Grand Heaven Alliance seized them, they wouldn't care too much about them. This time, the defensive battle was in the chess sea, so the well-prepared Myriad Demon Ridge naturally had a great advantage. If this was the case, then fourth senior brother would be in danger because the Myriad Demon Ridge had a premeditated plan. Obviously, they wouldn't be satisfied with just killing some 7th or 8th order cultivators. They were more willing to target the guardian envoys and deputy envoys of the core circle. Those people were the future pillars of their respective sects. If they all died here, the Spirit Stream Realm cultivators wouldn't be completely wiped out, but there would definitely be fewer people to carry the sect for the next few decades. The Myriad Demon Ridge was playing a big game of chess. Even if the function of the bone fragments was exposed, the Myriad Demon Ridge was fearless because the merging and attachment of the chess islands in the chess sea wasn't controlled by humans. Everyone who entered here could only passively wait for the chess island they were on to merge with other chess islands and then participate in the battle. Before all the chess islands merged into a huge continent, even a master like Li Baxian couldn't fly over the sea and escape to another chess island in a crisis. Flying over the sea consumed too much spirit energy, and Lu Yi knew this very well. The Myriad Demon's Ridge, who had the bone fragment, naturally had a great advantage. When he told them the news he got from Li Baxian, they were all shocked. No one expected the bone fragments to have such a magical function. My fourth senior brother told me to throw away the bone fragments quickly, or else it will take us to join the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators with the bone fragments. As Lu Yi spoke, he took out all the bone fragments and rubbed them in his hand. It seemed that he had no intention of throwing them away. "What does junior brother think?" Lan Yudai looked at him. "What do you think?" Lu Yi asked back. One of the 2 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators who came later said, "Senior Marshal Brother Li doesn't know about our situation here. He made this suggestion because he's worried about Junior Marshal Brother I's safety. There are 6 of us now, and with Junior Sister Hua Si's arrangement, even if we encounter people from the Myriad Devil Ridge, as long as there are less than 10 of us, we can still fight them. If this bone fragment really has such an effect, I feel that not only should we not throw it away, but we should also use it to bring us to the Myriad Devil Ridge." After he finished speaking, he turned his head and looked around. His fellow disciple naturally nodded in agreement. Lan Yudai and Gao Tai looked at each other and nodded. Everyone looked at Lu Yi. Lu Yi smiled and said, "Since no one has any objections, we'll each take one. I wonder if the effects will become stronger if we have more of these things." As he spoke, he distributed 3 out of the 4 bone fragments in his hand. Coincidentally, each person from the sect had one. His expression was solemn. Right now, many people from the myriad Devil Ridge must have gathered. The Grand Heaven Alliance probably suffered a great loss. As long as we can kill more enemies, we can reduce our losses. This way, we'll have the capital to fight against the myriad Devil Ridge after all the Chess Islands merge. Lan Yudai nodded. "You're right, Junior Marshal brother." Gao Tai suddenly had a sense of honor and mission. If that's the case, the heavy responsibility of saving the Grand Heaven Alliance falls on us? As soon as he said that, the other 2 people's expressions turned serious. Lu Yi laughed. "It's not that exaggerated. Some people from the Grand Heaven Alliance are lucky enough to gather together. Anyway, no matter what, we'll work harder together." Everyone nodded and felt a heavy burden on their shoulders. "Everyone, take a rest. I'll be on guard," Lu Yi said and went to the highest point of the small island in a flash. 2 hours later, a small island appeared in Lu Ye's sight. He immediately issued a warning. Everyone who was recuperating stood up and looked into the distance. They couldn't see the situation on the small island clearly, so they didn't know which camp they were from. However, no matter which camp they were from, everyone was ready to fight. After a simple discussion, a new plan to lure the enemies deep in came out. Lan Yudai and Gao Tai would be in charge of luring the enemies, while Lu Yi and the others would retreat to the back of the small island. If the enemies were cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance, they would naturally welcome them warmly. If they were from the myriad Devil Ridge, Lan Yudai and Gao Tai would lure them over. As long as they dared to chase after them, they would definitely pass through the mushroom area set up by Hua Ci. By then, they would have to improvise. The reason why Lan Yudai and Gao Tai were in charge of luring the enemies was that Gao Tai was a body cultivator with thick skin and flesh. Even if he was hit a few times, it wouldn't be fatal. With Hua Ci in charge of the rear, as long as he wasn't killed on the spot or suffered severe injuries, he would have a chance to be treated afterward. In short, Gao Tai was in charge of taking a beating. As for Lan Yudai, she was in charge of being as beautiful as a flower, with such a delicate and graceful female cultivator running in front with so many bloodstains on her body, it would be easy for the myriad Devil Ridge's cultivators to chase after her. This plan was proposed by Lu Yi and received everyone's approval. Only Lan Yudai looked at Lu Yi with a somewhat unfriendly expression. After the plan was formulated, everyone immediately began to implement it. Lu Yi, Hua Ci, and the others retreated to the back of the small island, while Lan Yudai and Gao Tai continued to watch from the commanding heights. While they were waiting, there was a loud boom. The earth quaked and the mountains swayed as the 2 islands collided. Lu Yi focused his senses and soon, there were fluctuations of spirit power and the whistling sound of spells flying through the air. After a short while, Lu Yi checked the battlefield imprint and transmitted the information he received from Lan Yudai. 5 people from the myriad Devil Ridge. 5 people meant that at least 1 person from 3 sects had died in the battle. Even if the myriad Devil Ridge had planned this, in a real battle, it was not certain that one could escape unscathed with more people. When they knew that they were going to die, regardless of whether it was the people from the myriad Devil Ridge or the Haotian Alliance, they would erupt with the momentum and determination to perish together with the enemy. Of course, after being weakened by Hua Ci's mushrooms, such momentum and determination were not much of a threat. Rumbling sounds kept coming from the front. Lu Yi soon saw Lan Yudai and Gao Tai fleeing in this direction in a sorry state. The 2 of them did not run together but split up. The cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge, who were chasing after them, were also very careful. They kept observing the situation around them while chasing, afraid that they would be ambushed. However, as long as they dared to land on this chess island, no matter how careful they were, it would be useless. Huasi's arrangements did not cover the entire island, but she had planted mushrooms at all the key points. Unless the cultivators could maintain a flying posture, they would inevitably inhale some of the spores. After seeing Lu Yi and the others, the cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge who were chasing after them showed an expression that they had expected it. However, after discovering that Lu Yi and Huasi were only in the 6th order, they relaxed a lot. 6 against 5, it was hard to say who had the upper hand, but on Lu Ye's side, other than Huasi and him, the other 4 were all covered in blood. It was obvious that they were all injured. Just as the 5 people were hesitating whether to attack or not, Lu Yi and the others had already rushed forward. The 5 people had no choice but to meet them head-on. Spirit artifacts flew out one after another and collided with each other in mid-air, making clanging sound. Halos of spirit energy explosions rose and fell one after another. Because Lu Yi and the others had left one person to protect Huasi, and because he was only in the 6th order, and could not control his artifact yet, the cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge had the absolute advantage in this battle. Just as the 5 people from the myriad Devil Ridge thought this, the situation suddenly took a turn for the worse. The spirit chi in their bodies became obscure, and they lost control of their spirit artifacts. In an instant, Lan Yu Dai and the others knocked down 3 of their spirit artifacts. When Lu Yi rushed in front of a myriad Devil Ridge cultivator, the latter retreated in horror. However, he could not block the saber light coming at him head-on. Blood splattered and screams rang out one after another. After 20 breaths, the battle was over. Lu Yi shook off the blood on his saber and sheathed it. He then called out to Gao Tai, "Senior Brother Gao, accompany me to the opposite island to take a look." "Okay." Gao Tai hurriedly agreed. The 2 of them went to investigate together. Although they felt that it was impossible for the other side to have left anyone there, it was always right to be careful. If there was any negligence that led to casualties on their side, it would not be worth it. Lan Yu Dai and the others stayed behind to clean up the battlefield and gave all the spoils to Huasi as usual. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't know how many storage bags she would have collected after this battle. She wanted to split some of her forces, but no one was willing to accept it. Everyone knew that the reason why the battle was so easy was all because of Huasi. Without Huasi's skills, even if they were 6 against 5, there would still be casualties. On the other hand, no one was injured, and they didn't even consume much spirit chi. Who wouldn't like such a battle? This made them even more determined to protect Huasi. On the other side, Lu Yi and Gao Tai carefully checked to make sure that there were no myriad Devil Ridge cultivators hiding there before returning to the main island. Afterwards, Lan Yu Dai accompanied Huasi to the opposite island to make the corresponding arrangements. As the island expanded, Huasi needed to set up more places. Therefore, she couldn't set up the entire island. She could only choose a few suitable locations, and this kind of thing consumed a lot of spirit power. Fortunately, the spirit-gathering spirit rune that Lu Yi had constructed previously was still in effect. Every time she finished setting up the rune, she only needed to meditate and recover, and she would be able to recover very quickly. Especially with the expansion of the island, the world energy became richer and richer. The world energy on the island was almost twice that of the Blue Blood Sex station. While Huasi was busy, Lu Yi thought about it and constructed a larger spirit-gathering spirit rune where everyone was resting. This spirit-gathering spirit rune consumed 60% of his spirit chi. Seeing Lu Ye's methods, Gao Tai and the rest were all shocked as if they were celestial beings. Only now did they realize that the 2 people from the Blue Blood sect were treasures. Not only could Huasi heal and save people, but she could also plant mushrooms to weaken enemies. Lu Yi could also easily construct spirit-gathering runes. This would undoubtedly make everyone's recovery much easier. In the future, they would no longer have to worry about spirit energy consumption. What kind of godly sect was the Blue Blood sect? Once you submit it, the maintenance staff will correct the content in 2 minutes. Please wait patiently. Chapter 192. Time passed. As the island merged and collided with other islands, battles broke out from time to time. Lu Yi and the others continued with their previous battle plan. Every time, they would let Gao Tai and Lan Yuti go out to lure the enemy in. Then, they would gather and destroy them. Although this method was a bit old, it was extremely effective. It wasn't that no one saw through their simple trick, but even if they did, so what? Unless the people from the myriad Devil Ridge didn't chase after them, they wouldn't be able to return if they did. Occasionally, they would encounter cultivators from their own side. The merging and attachment of the islands in the Chess Sea should follow a principle of proximity. The two closest islands would move closer to each other. At the same time, the strange bone pieces would play a role and attract each other. 3 days later, there were more than 20 cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance gathered on the island. At this time, it was very difficult to encounter cultivators who were alone. Regardless of whether it was the myriad Devil Ridge or the Grand Heaven Alliance, the weaker side had been wiped out long ago. The ones who survived were the cultivators who gathered together and formed small group. A small group of more than 20 people was not a small number. This also made the battle easier. Even if they encountered more cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge, the Grand Heaven Alliance would not lose out at all. With Hua Si at the back, the cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance weren't afraid of fighting. They didn't care if they were injured or not. After the battle, Hua Si would heal them. Moreover, with the spirit gathering runes constructed by Lu Yi, they didn't need to worry about spirit force consumption. Therefore, the cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance were like a group of fierce tigers in battle. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who faced them were doubting their lives. The island gradually expanded. Hua Si no longer went out to plant mushrooms because it was beyond her control. She was now a key target of protection. There were always 2 cultivators by her side. Even Gao Tai would follow Lu Yi closely when he went out to battle. It was as if he would sacrifice himself to save Lu Yi at any time. Although the 2 from the Jade Blood sect had the lowest cultivation, they were of great help to the Grand Heaven Alliance in this environment. No one dared to let anything happen to them. A jade-green light flickered, and a numb and itchy feeling came over. Hua Si was healing Lu Yi. This time, they encountered a tough nut to crack. When a small island on the opposite side merged, they discovered that there were more than 30 cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge gathered there. This was a terrifying number. It could be said that at this stage, this group of myriad Demons Ridge cultivators was practically invincible in the Chess Sea. No one would be a match for them. Those myriad Demons Ridge cultivators must have gone through many small islands to form such a scale. They were invincible and arrogant all the way here. As a result, when they charged into the main island, they immediately met with misfortune. In just a few dozen breaths of time, more than 10 of the 30 people died. The rest of the people fled in panic, leaving behind a few more corpses before returning to their island. Lu Yi and the others naturally chased after them. However, the other party had also set up some traps in advance, causing some casualties on their side. The situation suddenly came to a stalemate. Neither side dared to rashly set foot on the other's island. Both sides sent out a few eloquent debaters to argue with each other across the air. However, it was not a solution to continue arguing like this. They had the advantage in numbers, and there were also medical cultivators in the rear. After some discussion, they decided to attack forcefully. The battle on the Chess Sea could not be dragged on for too long because no one could say when another island would merge. If it were their own people, they would naturally be overjoyed. However, if it were their enemies, it would only make the situation worse. After all, after every battle, they still needed some time to recover. After 2 strong attacks, although no one on their side died, a few people were injured. They had no choice but to give up. We can't drag this out any longer. With that bone piece playing a role, the next opponent we encounter will most likely be from the Myriad Demon's Ridge. At that time, it will become more and more disadvantageous for us, a guardian of an 8th rank sect said. This wasn't him trying to scare them, but the truth. Over the past 3 days, Lu Yi and the others had gathered over 20 people, but most of them had encountered cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. According to the odds, every time the islands merged, the chances of encountering cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge were around 70%. This was undoubtedly the bone piece playing a role, affecting the direction of the Chess Islands movement. There is a formation cultivator on the other side. Although the formation he set up is still crude, its power cannot be underestimated. We have to find a way to kill that formation cultivator. That guy is well protected by the people of the Myriad Demon's Ridge. It will be difficult to kill him. The few of them discussed while recovering, but in the end, they couldn't come up with an effective plan. Of course, if they didn't care about the losses and forced their way through, they would definitely be able to win with their current advantage in numbers. However, they didn't know how many people would die. Unless it was absolutely necessary, no one was willing to do that. Lu Yi tilted his head and looked at a thin cultivator beside him. This person was holding a palm-sized spider and repairing it. The spider looked very lifelike, almost no different from a real spider. However, it was not a living creature, but a kind of mechanical creation. The thin cultivator was the guardian of the Qianji Pavilion, called Lu Yushan. The Qianji Pavilion was a very special sect in the 9 states because this sect inherited the school of Yanshi. In addition to the 6 major schools of cultivators, there were also some smaller schools. Some had a long history, and some were rising, but without exception, these schools were very small and did not conform to the general cultivation trend, so they generally did not form a large scale. The sect master used to have a double-armed carriage. The horses pulling the carriage were like living creatures, which was a creation of Yanshi. However, on the way back to the Blue Blood sect with Lu Yi, it was ambushed and destroyed. At that time, the sect master also told Lu Yi that he might have a chance to meet Yanshi in the future. This Lu Yushan was a Yanshi who was good at making mechanical creations. Lu Ye's impression of Yanshi was limited by the double-armed carriage, thinking that the things made by Yanshi were probably only auxiliary. However, after fighting side by side with Lu Yushan, he found that his understanding of Yanshi was somewhat biased. Their creations could kill enemies, and they were very powerful. Lu Yushan had a spirit artifact, the Thunder Dragon Cannon. Its attack method was very simple. It absorbed the spirit energy of spirit stones, compressed it, and then shot it out. Lu Yi saw with his own eyes that a 7th-order weapon cultivator was hit by the Thunder Dragon Cannon, and then half of his chest was gone. Such a fierce attack, even his defensive spirit rune could not resist. However, even though it was ferocious, it also had a huge drawback. It took a long time to store up power, so it was very easy to avoid. Therefore, during the battle, Lu Yushan did not use it, but once he used it, it would be earth-shattering. At the same time, the consumption of the Thunder Dragon Cannon was also very large. One shot would cost 4 spirit stones. Yanshi's mechanical creations were very exquisite. They relied mostly on external forces, so it was difficult for high-level cultivators to see Yanshi's shadow. However, this did not mean that Yanshi had no future. Talented Yanshi could also cultivate to a high realm. The sect master of the 1,000 Secret Pavilion was a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator, but because the number of disciples in the sect was too small, the sect's grade was only 8th grade. At this moment, the spider that Lu Yushan was repairing was a mechanical creation. This thing had no lethality and was only used to detect the enemy's situation. The situation on the opposite island was detected by him using this kind of mechanical spider. After healing, Lu Yi picked up a mechanical spider to investigate. Lu Yushan looked up and smiled at Lu Yi. "Junior brother Yi, are you interested in this thing? I've never seen it before. Yanshi is a small sect, and there are not many people. It is normal that junior brother has not seen it before. Does senior brother have many of these creations? I have more than a dozen. Lu Yushan said frankly. If junior brother wants one, take it and play with it. Lu Yi took one and walked over to Hua Xi. Hua Xi looked at the spider in his hand with a vigilant face. Her hair stood on end, but on the surface she remained calm. What are you doing? Take a look at this. Lu Yi threw the spider to her, but Hua Xi did not catch it and it fell directly on her chest. Hua Xi looked down, motionless. Her face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye, and her body began to tremble slightly. Are you afraid? Lu Yi picked up the spider again and looked at her in surprise. I'm not afraid. Hua Xi's voice changed. Lu Yi nodded. Senior brother Lu has more than a dozen of these things. I was thinking, if you can plant the mushroom here and then let senior brother Lu send it to the other side, when the time is right. He clenched a fist and opened it in front of Hua Xi. Boom! Since the enemy did not dare to come over, the mushroom would be sent over. The effect would be the same. If this method worked, then the future battle would not be limited to luring the enemy in, but they could also take the initiative to attack. Of course, the premise was that Lu Yushan had enough mechanical creations. Can it work? The Guardian Envoys, who were discussing how to kill the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge, also looked over. Lu Yushan also stopped what he was doing. Hua Xi took a deep breath and reached out to take the spider in Lu Ye's hand, calmly saying, I'll try. When her fingertips touched Lu Ye's hand, Lu Yi felt that her skin was very cold. After a while, Hua Xi said, Yes, but I don't know if senior brother Lu can still control this thing. As soon as her voice fell, Lu Yushan urged his spiritual power. With a slight movement of his mind, the spider in Hua Xi's hand suddenly moved, and its hairy claws scratched her palm. With a bang, the spider slapped Lu Ye's face. Lu Ye's face was covered with dust from the exploding spores, and even the delicate spider was torn apart. Everyone around looked at this scene with stunned eyes. Hua Xi smiled firmly. My hand slipped. Lu Yi wiped his face and looked at her expressionlessly. Only Lu Yushan stretched out a trembling hand and said bitterly, My 8 claws. The plan worked. Several people immediately began to work. Lu Yushan had a junior sister on his side. Both of them had many small and exquisite mechanical creations. Hua Xi planted mushrooms in each of those creations. After she was done, she was about to collapse. Chapter 193. The battle had already begun, and more than 20 people from their side were advancing. The body cultivator was at the front, followed by the weapon cultivator, followed by the Dharma cultivator and the ghost cultivator. Hua Xi was at the back, and 2 cultivators followed her closely, blocking any possible attacks for her. The power of techniques and artifact manipulation began to show. The 2 sides fought fiercely from a distance, and their spirit energies surged. Lu Yi and Lu Yushan stood at the highest point of the island, not participating in the battle. They had more important tasks. At this moment, Lu Yushan was sitting cross-legged in front of Lu Yi, his spirit energies surging as he controlled his spider creation to sneak into the enemy's chess island. Lu Yushan assumed a strong offensive posture just to attract the enemy's attention and make it easier for him to move. Otherwise, the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators would easily discover the strange spiders. After all, there were basically no living creatures on the chess island. Lu Yi stood here to protect Lu Yushan, who was controlling the mechanism creation, and to wait for an opportunity. The enemy array cultivator had to be killed. Otherwise, even if Hua Xi's method worked, their side would suffer losses. He watched for a moment before turning his head to look at the sea. There was another chess island floating towards them, and it would probably merge with them in an incense stick's worth of time. He didn't know whether it was an enemy or a friend, so he couldn't delay. If there were dozens of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators there, they would be attacked from both sides. The aftermath of the battle became fiercer and fiercer until a certain moment, Lu Yushan opened his eyes and stood up. Everyone is in position. Lu Yi nodded. Let's move. He took a step forward and held Lu Yushan's arm with both hands. Fiery red spirit energies flowed behind his back and turned into wings. He soared into the sky and flew straight towards the battlefield. Hua Xi, who was at the back of the array, noticed the spirit energies fluctuations and turned her head to look back. She saw Lu Yi flying over with Lu Yushan. Their eyes met and she nodded slightly. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yi and Lu Yushan passed through their ranks. This scene also shocked the cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge. Although they didn't know what Grand Heaven Alliance was going to do, it was obviously something big. Several streams of light immediately changed direction and swept towards Lu Yi, but before they could get close, they lost their momentum. The artifact manipulation of 7th Order cultivators was limited, so how could Lu Yi easily break into their attack range? It could be said that he was invincible when he activated the flying wing tattoo. Lu Yushan, who was held in front of him, was on tenterhooks for a while. When he discovered that the enemy couldn't attack him at all, he also relaxed and made a hand seal while shouting in a low voice, "Explode!" In the myriad Devil Ridge camp, spiders that were hiding in ambush exploded one after another. This gave everyone from the myriad Devil Ridge quite a shock. No one knew what was going on. However, after the spiders exploded, they did not suffer any damage. Just as they were feeling suspicious, Hua Xi took action. A circle of dark green aura, visible to the naked eye, spread out in all directions with her as the center. It went past the cultivators on her side and enveloped the cultivators on her side. The dozen or so cultivators from the myriad demons' ridge panicked because the spiritual power in their bodies had become obscure and sluggish, just like last time. The last time they had barged into the other party's chess island, they had encountered such a thing. In that battle, they had suffered heavy casualties. After returning to the island, they had spent a lot of effort to remove the poison that had invaded their bodies and restore the circulation of their spiritual power. They no longer dared to barge into the other party's island at will. They had been guarding their own chess island, but even so, they could not avoid the enemy's methods. In an instant, several Imperial artifact streams were shot down. At the rear of the myriad Devil Ridge camp, a green-robed man watched with a solemn expression. He held a spirit array in his hand, waiting for the people from Grand Heaven Alliance to step into a certain area before activating the power of the spirit array that he had set up in advance. He vaguely felt that today was not a good day, but before he died, he would not let the people from Grand Heaven Alliance have an easy time. No matter what, he would drag a few of them down with him. However, at this moment, a great sense of crisis enveloped him. He suddenly looked up and saw a bright light blooming in the sky. As time passed, the light became brighter and brighter, as if it had turned into a small sun in a short period of time. The sense of crisis was coming from the sky. "It's that Yen Shi." A cultivator protecting him shouted in a low voice. Lu Yushan had previously blasted the chest of a 7th Order cultivator with a single shot. This scene was still fresh in the minds of the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. Seeing the small sun-like light blooming, how could they not know who was preparing to attack? They also saw a person holding Yen Shi behind him. That person had a pair of fiery red wings with flowing spirit energy on his back. "Don't let him get close," someone shouted again. 2 streams of light immediately flew over, shuttling back and forth. As long as Lu Yi dared to approach, he would immediately be met with a storm-like attack. However, Lu Yi just flew with Lu Yushan and stopped outside the attack range of their Imperial artifact. No matter how fast the 2 streams of light shuttled back and forth, they could not hurt them at all. The smile on Lu Yushan's face gradually began to turn ferocious. After a few breaths of time, the strangely shaped spirit artifact in his hand was fully charged. "Thunder Dragon Roar!" Lu Yushan roared. A strong light fell from the sky, turning into a beam of light that blasted straight in the direction of the array cultivator. Wherever the light passed, the two imperial artifacts in front of him were directly blown away. When Lu Yushan stimulated the power of his spirit artifact, the array cultivator felt that something was wrong and hurriedly dodged to the side. At the same time, a myriad Devil Ridge body cultivator who was protecting him held a shield spirit artifact and blocked in front of him like a mountain. Pushing his spirit energy, the shield flashed with light. However, no matter how strong the light was, it was still covered by the beam of light that descended from the sky. The powerful spirit energy fluctuations slowly dissipated, and from the sky to the ground, light particles were annihilated like fireflies. Looking at the place covered by the beam of light, the myriad Devil Ridge body cultivator's shield spirit artifact was covered with cracks and shattered with a crash. At the same time, the body cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to his knees with a thud. The array cultivator in blue was not injured, but he was still shaken by the strong impact. Just as he got up, a figure fell from the sky, followed by a bright blade light that flashed in front of him. Not far away, Lu Yushan fell to the ground with a thud and spat out the soil in his mouth. Looking at Lu Yi, who had already killed his way into the enemy's rear, he grimaced in pain. Too realistic. After he fired that shot, Lu Yi immediately threw him away. If it weren't for his seventh order cultivation and the ability to fly, he would have fallen to his death. He knew that Lu Yi wanted to kill the array cultivator as soon as possible, so he hurriedly got up and rushed over with his Thunder Dragon cannon. However, after just a few steps, he saw Lu Yi flying into the sky again with blood spurting out of his body. Several streams of light chased after him. Got him! Lu Yi roared. Kill! In the Grand Heaven Alliance camp, Gao Tai roared and was the first to rush forward. The enemy's array cultivator was dead, and the arranged spirit arrays had become inanimate objects without anyone controlling them. There was no need to worry about them anymore. The battle ended quickly. Without the array cultivator, their strength had been weakened by Hua Si, and they were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. How could the myriad demons Ridge side be a match for them? They fell one after another and were soon killed. It was another hearty victory. Except for a few people who were injured, no one died. The most seriously injured was Lu Yi. He killed his way into the enemy's rear with his flying ability. While he killed the array cultivator, he was also injured by several other myriad demons Ridge cultivators. Fortunately, they were only flesh wounds and were not serious. Keep fighting, don't stop. Another chess island is approaching. After Lu Yi finished speaking, the group of people knew what he was planning. The array cultivator immediately activated his spirit array while the others attacked each other with their spirit arrays. The battle was in full swing, and the clanging sounds and fluctuations of spirit chi spread far and wide. Lan Yu Dai brought two people to hide nearby and investigate the situation. After a while, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The two chess islands collided. After a while, Lan Yu Dai sent news that there was no need to act anymore. The people who came were actually from the Grand Heaven Alliance, and there were more than 10 of them. When the two sides met, the number of people on their side increased to nearly 40. However, compared to Lu Ye's side, these people were in a much worse state. Almost all of them were injured, and their clothes were covered in blood. Some of them were seriously injured and were on the verge of death. Knowing that there was a medical cultivator here, they were all overjoyed. According to the severity of their injuries, Hua Si treated them one by one. Because of the battlefield imprint, news spread quickly in the chess sea. Now, almost everyone on the Grand Heaven Alliance side knew that the myriad demons Ridge came prepared this time and wanted to massacre the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. However, even if they knew this, the Grand Heaven Alliance side could not change the situation. Now, everyone on the Grand Heaven Alliance only had one hope, and that was to meet with the chess island where the Jade Blood sect was located. It was rumored that not only did they have a medical cultivator who could treat injuries, but they also had a few huge spirit-gathering spirit runes that could help people recover quickly. However, they had no control over which chess island would merge with. Most of the cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance could only stick together as much as possible so that fewer people would die in battle. This way, they would have the power to fight back when they encountered an enemy. It had to be said that the chess island where Lu Yi and the others were at had disrupted the deployment of the Myriad Devil Ridge to a certain extent. If they hadn't killed those Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators, those small groups from the Myriad Devil Ridge would have definitely continued to expand and converge. In this way, any cultivator from the Grand Heaven Alliance who encountered them would only have a dead end. In this way, the Myriad Devil Ridge's advantage would snowball. They killed the Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators not only to kill the enemy, but also to a large extent, to prevent the deaths of many of their own cultivators. Previously, Gao Tai said that they shouldered the heavy responsibility of saving the Grand Heaven Alliance. Although it was a joke, the situation was indeed slowly developing in this direction. With this successful cooperation experience, the way Lu Yi and the others killed the enemy became more flexible. They no longer had to wait passively. When necessary, they could take the initiative to attack. For this reason, Lu Yushan and his junior sister from the Thousand Secrets Pavilion were urgently creating those small mechanical creations. Chapter 194. On the 10th day after entering the Chess Sea, more than 100 cultivators gathered on the Chess Island, and the end of the island could not be seen. On the 15th day, the number of cultivators increased to 200. The reason for such an explosive growth was that the number of cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance who were still alive in each batch was not small, ranging from a dozen to 30 to 40 cultivators. As the number of cultivators increased, the strength of the Grand Heaven Alliance also increased. Correspondingly, the battle became more intense. The cultivators of the Grand Heaven Alliance were gathering, and so were the cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge. The small-scale battles between a few cultivators were no longer visible, but now, when the great battle broke out, the sky was filled with the light of spells and imperial artifacts. According to the information that Lu Yi currently had, the merger of the chess islands would generally last about 18 to 20 days. During this period, the chess islands scattered across the chess sea would slowly converge into a huge continent. When this continent was formed, some rare treasures would appear, and they might come from the chess islands that no one had set foot on. After the formation of the continent, it would last for about 10 days before collapsing again, transforming into countless chess islands. When that time came, the Battle of Spirit Creek would come to an end, and all of the cultivators who were still alive would be sent back to their respective sections. 15 days had passed, and in a few days, the merger of the chess islands would come to an end. Once the continent was formed, the confrontation between the cultivators of the two camps would become more intense. Now, everyone could only wait passively, but after the merger of the chess islands, they could take the initiative to attack. The preparations made by the Myriad Devil Ridge would truly come into play at that moment. These days, news from all sides had been spreading and exchanging. From time to time, there would be bad news. Some of the chess islands occupied by the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators were attacked and annihilated. If too many cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance were killed or injured in the periphery, the Myriad Devil Ridge would be able to eliminate the Grand Heaven Alliance with their advantage in numbers after the continent was formed. If they had enough time to search, they could even kill everyone from the Grand Heaven Alliance. The situation in the periphery was not optimistic, and the situation in the inner circle was even worse. At least, the two cultivators from the Jade Blood sect were the core of the periphery, but the cultivators in the inner circle were not so lucky. When they fought, no one helped them to weaken the enemy's strength. When they were injured, no one helped them heal. They could only rely on taking pills or meditating to adjust their breathing when they consumed too much energy. After a series of fierce battles, even the 8th or 9th order cultivators who cultivated heaven-grade secret arts suffered many casualties. 2 days later, the number of cultivators on the island increased again. There were now more than 300 cultivators. There were 70 cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance on the small island that was merged with the Grand Heaven Alliance. After learning that this was the Chess Island where the cultivators of the Jade Blood sect resided, the 70 or so people were overjoyed. It was as if they had found their mother's home. They even deliberately came over to get acquainted with Lu Yi and Hua Xi. With a lineup of more than 300 people, their side was unprecedentedly powerful. Everyone was impatiently waiting for the final merger of the Chess Island. It was because only in this way could the other cultivators of the Haotian Alliance who had not gathered here take the initiative to approach them. Only then would they have a chance to survive. The day he had been waiting for had finally arrived. When the Chess Island suddenly shook and sped up in a certain direction, the expressions of all the cultivators on the Chess Island turned solemn. Everyone realized that the final merger had arrived. At this moment, the Chess Islands on the entire Chess Sea, which were originally difficult to calculate, had merged into one huge island after another. These islands were being pulled by some kind of force and were drifting in the same direction. Halfway through, some of the islands began to merge and attach to each other, becoming bigger islands. Some of the islands were inhabited, while others were uninhabited. The uninhabited islands were very small, as if they had never been merged before. However, without exception, those uninhabited islands contained some precious natural treasures. Some of them were even unique to the Chess Sea. There was another island somewhere on the Chess Island. The island was not small, and there was a fruit tree growing at the highest point of the island. 9 palm-sized blue flowers grew on the fruit tree. Even from 10 miles away, the fragrance of the flowers could be smelled in the air. The world energy visible to the naked eye turned into a vortex and gathered in the 9 blue flowers. The blue flowers were also changing rapidly. Under the stem of the flowers, fruits were beginning to grow. It was foreseeable that such a fruit tree would definitely attract strong cultivators from both camps to fight for it. A great battle was destined to break out here. Before the Chess Islands were completely merged, Lu Ye's side had already started fighting. This was because the nearby Chess Islands had attached themselves to them on the way to the merger. There were 2 Chess Islands at the same time, one on the left and one on the right, sandwiching Lu Ye's Chess Island in the middle. There were about 100 people gathered on each of the 2 Chess Islands. Before Lu Yi and the others could figure out which camp the 2 Chess Islands belonged to, the cultivators on the left and right had already charged toward them. Both sides were from the myriad Devil Ridge. After contacting each other and communicating with each other, they concluded that the one sandwiched in the middle was from the Haotian Alliance. There was no need for them to be polite. When the cultivators on their side saw that there was such a good thing, they immediately became spirited. Ever since the number of cultivators on their side exceeded 100, they had been the ones to initiate the attack in every great battle. There was no other way. With so many cultivators, the enemy could no longer attack rashly. No matter how good they were at acting, they could not lure the enemy in. The enemy only needed to send a few people to investigate, and they would know that the situation was not right. When they took the initiative to attack, even with Hua Xi's support, some casualties were inevitable. The cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge were not pushovers. Just like the people from the Haotian Alliance, they had experienced hundreds of battles and were never afraid of death. It had been many days, but no one dared to take the initiative to attack. As a result, the many tricks that Hua Xi had set up previously were useless. Therefore, even though they were being attacked from both sides, they did not panic at all. Instead, they were even a little expectant. Everyone looked eager to try and secretly urged their spiritual power. There were too many wolves and too little meat. This was the time to compete with their eyesight and hand speed. Killing the enemy's guardian would not only give them meritorious service, but they could also take away the blessing of the enemy's Tianji pillar. However, if they killed the deputy guardian, they would only get meritorious service. The difference was huge. The cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge on both sides cooperated well and were full of vigor. On the other hand, they stood in groups of 2 or 3. There was no special formation, and they looked like a motley crew. As usual, spells and flying lights began to collide. After this fight, the cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge on both sides realized that something was wrong. There were too many people from the Humane alliance on this side. Both sides added together did not have as many people as the enemy. However, the battle had already begun and they could not retreat now. They could only grit their teeth and persevere. Fortunately, they soon realized that the Humane alliance did not have a unified command. Therefore, even though they had more people, they did not have the upper hand. This made the cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge calm down, and they attacked more vigorously. However, they did not know that most of the 300 cultivators from the Humane alliance were focused on a gentlewoman. Therefore, they did not seem to have much combat power. This woman was called Huasi. The number of people who were responsible for protecting Huasi increased to 5. One was a body cultivator, one was a weapon cultivator, one was a spell cultivator, one was a ghost cultivator, and one was Yenshur. She was Lu Yushan's junior sister. As Huasi raised her jade-like hand, she changed her hand sign and a green halo swept out. The 300 cultivators from the Humane alliance seemed to have received some instructions, and their attacks intensified instantly. Along with the exclamations from both sides, a large area of flying lights in the sky was destroyed. The flying lights from the Humane alliance's imperial weapons blasted into the enemy's camp. The body cultivators and weapon cultivators in the front were bleeding, and more than 10 of them died on the spot. Thunder Dragon Roar! The thin and small Lu Yushan shouted with great vigor. The spiritual weapon in his hand emitted a strong beam of light and blasted into the enemy's group. No one knew how many people he killed, but his expression suddenly became very happy. Kill! Gao Tai roared angrily and was the first to attack again. The big shield spiritual weapon in his hand propped up a barrier and withstood the attacks of the cultivators from the other side. Behind him, the weapon cultivators advanced by leaps and bounds like jackals and wolves. Their vigor was so terrifying that 2 red lights almost floated out of their eyes. Lu Yi also followed behind him, and did not leave him by an inch. After a while, Gao Tai collided with the body cultivator from the other side. It was like 2 huge rocks colliding. The shield's spiritual weapon made a loud explosion and dense spiritual light. Both of them took a few steps back. This time, they were evenly matched. However, Gao Tai was laughing because while he was retreating, the weapon cultivators behind him had already flashed left and right. The burly body cultivator from the other side became frightened. Although he crazily urged his spiritual power and the power of his spiritual weapon, when the weapon cultivators passed by him, blood still spurted out of his body, and he knelt on the ground. On the side of the myriad demons ridge, the body cultivators standing in the front row had the same experience. The defense system of the body cultivators in the front row had been broken through. What was left was a feast of killing. Lu Yi had just rushed to the front of a panicked spell cultivator when a flying light of a flying weapon attacked from the side and pierced a big hole in the spell cultivator's head. Lu Yi immediately withdrew the long saber that he had swung. This was a common thing. After these few battles, although they were lively, they did not really gain much. Now that they had more people on their side, there were people who did not gain anything in every battle. He immediately fixed his eyes on the next target, which was a weapon cultivator who was fleeing to the back. He raised his hand and shot out a fire phoenix technique, hitting that person until he staggered and his back was charred. Then, he pounced on him and slashed down with his saber. Seeing 2 spots of red light fall on the back of his hand, Lu Yi heaved a long sigh of relief. In the current situation, it was really not easy to snatch a kill. The army was defeated like a landslide. As the myriad demons ridge fled, there were countless corpses along the way. The remaining dozen people were chased to the seaside. Seeing that they had nowhere to go, they all jumped into the sea. A large number of inexplicable shadows surged up from the sea and drowned these people. No! A Grand Sky Alliance cultivator reached out his hand and knelt on the ground with a plop. His eyes were red and his face was full of sorrow. If an uninformed person saw this, they would probably think that these people who jumped into the sea were his relative. Why? Why would you rather commit suicide than let me kill you? Damn it, another battle where they did not gain anything. Chapter 195. The battle on Lu Ye's side was over, and it was the same on the other side. They collected the spoils of war, counted the casualties, and took the initiative to go to Huasi for treatment. They had killed many enemies in this battle, and their side had not suffered many casualties. Lu Yi sent a message to fourth senior brother to ask about the situation on his side. Before, because the Chess Islands had not been completely merged, there was no way for them to communicate with each other, but now that the final merger had begun, the previous restrictions would no longer exist once all the Chess Islands were merged into one continent. Lu Yi sent a message mainly to ask if fourth senior brother wanted to come over and join him. His situation was safe for the time being, and he even had the strength to suppress the Myriad Demon's Ridge people. If fourth senior brother's situation was not good, coming over to join him would undoubtedly be a good choice. However, he was in the outermost area, so if fourth senior brother came over, his cultivation would definitely be suppressed by Heaven's Secret. No matter what kind of terrain the Spirit Stream garrison battle took place, Heaven's Secret would always have this kind of balance and suppression. After all, the difference in cultivation between the garrison envoys of the various great sects was huge. Take Lu Yi and fourth senior brother for example. Lu Yi cultivated an Earth-grade secret art to the 6th Order, while fourth senior brother cultivated a Heaven-grade secret art to the 8th Order. The difference in cultivation wasn't as simple as just 2 realms, it was a full 5 orders. This was because a 9th Order Earth-grade secret art was only equivalent to a 6th Order Heaven-grade secret art. Both of them were cultivators who had opened 180 apertures. The difference in cultivation was too great. If not for Heaven's Secret's balance and suppression, any master like Li Baxin could easily defeat the Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators in the outermost area. After waiting for a while, fourth senior brother replied, telling Lu Yi to go with the flow. He still had some matters to attend to and would come to find him when he was done. Above the vast Chess Sea, streams of light swept across the surface of the sea. The leading stream of light was a gourd-like spirit artifact. Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan sat on the gourd. Both of them were injured. Feng Yuechan leaned on Li Baxin's shoulder with a pale face, coughing lightly from time to time. It seemed that her injuries were not light. There were not many streams of light following behind them, only a dozen or so, about 20 people. After ending his communication with Lu Yi, Li Baxin breathed a sigh of relief. He had always been worried about Lu Ye's safety. Now that he knew that Lu Yi was doing well, he naturally relaxed. However, Lu Ye's situation wasn't very good. Just as Lu Yi had thought before, Myriad Demon Ridge had come with a premeditated plan and naturally wouldn't be satisfied with just killing some 7th or 8th Order Guardian envoys. They wanted to kill the leaders of Grand Heaven Union like Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan. As long as they could kill enough of these leaders, Myriad Demon Ridge would be able to occupy the upper hand in the confrontation between the two camps in the next few decades. In the past 20 days, Grand Heaven Alliance had suffered great losses in the inner circle. Even Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan were injured. They had previously encountered a group of experts from the Myriad Demon's Ridge. There were simply too many of them, so they had no choice but to escape from Chess Island. Normally, this was tantamount to courting death because flying on the sea consumed too much spirit energy. Even Li Baxin and the others couldn't guarantee that they could fly to the next Chess Island before their spirit energy ran out. But now, all the Chess Islands were in the final stages of merging. All the Chess Islands were moving towards a central point, so they had to take the risk. If they were lucky, they might be able to find the next chess island before their spirit energy ran out. Of course, the premise was that the chess islands weren't occupied by the myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators. Otherwise, they would be courting death. Senior brother, I'm afraid I can't do it. Feng Yuechan's weak voice sounded, gasping for breath. Senior brother, it's so good to have met you in this life. Li Baxian looked solemn and sighed. Don't be silly. I can feel it. Senior brother, I want to return to the sect. I will take you back to the sect. Li Baxian lowered his head. After returning to the sect, cough cough, let's get married. Asterisk pa, asterisk Li Baxian slapped Feng Yuechan's smooth forehead with a backhand. Feng Yuechan covered her forehead, feeling wronged. I'm about to die. Why did you hit me? Li Baxian looked at her angrily. Do you think I don't know that your mother put on a treasure robe for you before we came? Feng Yuechan's face turned red. I wore it inside. How did you know, senior brother? Hey, there's a chess island over there. We're saved. Li Baxian suddenly looked in a direction with bright eyes. Following his actions, the gourd spiritual artifact carried him and Feng Yuechan toward the chess island. More than a dozen streams of light followed closely behind. Loud buzzing sounds were heard continuously. When the entire chess island stopped, the final merging was completed. Looking down from the sky, the scattered islands on the chess island could no longer be seen. There was only a huge continent. Everywhere in the continent, the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators gathered together and began to move almost at the same time. They began to clear the outer regions of the continent in a way that they had agreed upon earlier. Teams of varying numbers began to search for the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators either clockwise or counterclockwise. Not only were the cultivators in the outer area affected, but the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators in the inner area and the inner area were also affected. In an instant, the entire continent seemed to have turned into a huge millstone. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were activating the millstone's power. Once they found traces of the Grand Heaven Alliance's cultivators, the millstone's spinning force would crush all of their enemies. Before the final merging of the continent was completed, the 300 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators on the chess island where Lu Yi was located began to formulate their next plan. Now, Lu Yi and the others were faced with two choices. One was to wait on the spot. After all, Lu Yi and the others had managed this place for more than 20 days. Not to mention other things, Hua Si had made all kinds of arrangements here. Moreover, Lu Yi had constructed more than a dozen huge spirit-gathering spiritual runes here to facilitate killing enemies and recovery. Therefore, if they waited on the spot, they would have a huge advantage whether it was letting the other Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators come over or waiting for the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators to walk into the trap. However, if they did that, the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators who were scattered outside would face more danger. This was because their team had the largest number of Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. If they did not take action, the other small teams would definitely be surrounded and annihilated by the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. For the time being, they did not know how many myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were still alive. However, it was definitely more than the Grand Heaven Alliance. Therefore, the second choice for their team was to take the initiative to attack. While searching for the enemy's tracks, they would absorb their own cultivators to strengthen their forces. Those who came to participate in the defense of Spirit Creek were the guardian envoys and deputy envoys of the various sections. Even if they had not participated in such a large-scale operation before, they still had some foresight. Therefore, after a brief discussion, they almost reached a consensus. That was to give up the various advantages here and take the initiative to attack. This was to save people and at the same time to save themselves. Otherwise, when the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators cleaned up the periphery, they would definitely launch an attack here. When that time came, it would not be just 100 or 200 people, but 1,000 or 2,000 people. After the plan was decided, the 300-plus people were divided into more than 30 small teams. Each team had about 10 people. They would cooperate with each other and work closely together. After choosing a direction, the 300-plus people set off with a rumble. At the same time, messages were sent out to inform the small teams scattered outside of the continent about their movement trajectory, asking them to find an opportunity to gather. Lu Yi and Hua Xi were naturally in a team. Lan Yudi, Gao Tai, Lu Yushan and his junior sister were also in the team. The remaining few were responsible for protecting Hua Xi. Everyone was running at full speed. Only Hua Xi and Lu Yushan's junior sister were riding on a mechanical wolf, looking relaxed. This was a mechanical creation of the senior brother and junior sister, which consumed spirit stones and some spiritual power. It could be used as a means of transportation. Its speed was not too fast, but it was not too slow either. Its advantage was that it could save physical strength. Lu Yi more or less regretted not bringing Hu Po along. Previously, he had considered the possibility of exposing his identity if he brought Hu Po along. However, no one knew that the terrain of the defense of Spirit Creek was the Chess Sea. In a place like the Chess Sea, it did not matter whether one's identity was exposed or not. After all, it was a movement between the Chess Islands. Hua Xi's mechanical wolf was covered with storage bags. There were no less than 100 of them. This was the result of Hua Xi's efforts to tactfully refuse. If it were not for the fact that she could not carry them all, she would probably have hundreds of storage bags by now. This time, the defense of Spirit Creek, Hua Xi had earned a lot. Not only did she earn these storage bags, but most of the cultivators from the various large sects had also received her treatment. She had earned even more favors. Back when she had been a rogue cultivator, she had been completely unknown. However, after the battle to defend Spirit Stream Garrison, many of the guardian emissaries and deputy emissaries from various sects had come to know of her. Other things aside, if she went anywhere on the Spirit Stream Garrison, she would definitely be protected by other sections. Of course, it was the same for Lu Yi. The spirit-gathering spirit tattoos he had constructed had greatly facilitated the recovery of the cultivators on his side. The two's gains this time had nothing to do with the protection of the Jade Blood sect. They had earned it with their own abilities. It could be said that they had won glory for their sect. 30 miles ahead, there are senior brothers from Grand Heaven Alliance being hunted down. They're heading towards us. Everyone, prepare for battle. A roar suddenly came from the front. The continent had been formed, and the sun was hanging high in the sky. With vague positioning and communication methods, it was easy for cultivators to determine each other's location. "Kill them until they piss in their pants," someone shouted. Then, a group of cultivators from the Grand Sky Alliance ran out like bandits going down the mountain. Lu Yi didn't run 30 miles because they were facing each other. After a dozen miles, he felt the fluctuation of spiritual power in front of him. It must be the cultivators of the Grand Heaven Alliance who were being chased and were resisting the enemy's attack. Since they were being hunted down, the situation was naturally not optimistic. However, after receiving support from the cultivators on his side, the situation immediately reversed. When the cultivators from Myriad Devil Ridge saw that the situation was not right, they hastily exchanged blows. After leaving behind some corpses, they turned around and fled. Those who were being hunted down became those who were running away, and those who were running away became the ones being hunted down. The scene was extremely lively. Lu Yi warned Hua Xi. His figure shot out like an arrow, passing by one cultivator after another. It didn't take long for him to catch up with the fleeing enemies. He opened up a path with spells, knocked down the enemies, and hacked down with his saber. He didn't even have time to collect the spoils of war before he continued to pursue. Chapter 196. Kill the enemy, rest, set off, kill the enemy again, rest. The number of people on their side continued to grow. In the periphery, all the cultivators from Grand Heaven Alliance who received the news gathered here. Some of them successfully ran to the rendezvous point, while some were intercepted and suffered heavy losses. There had never been a Spirit Creek garrison battle that developed like this. In the previous Spirit Creek garrison battles, even if cultivators from the same camp cooperated, they would at most form a team of no more than 10 people. After all, when the number of people increased, many things would become chaotic. The spoils of war after killing the enemy, the good things found, and the merit points would be difficult to distribute. However, this time, due to the pressure created by Myriad Demon Ridge, the entire Grand Heaven Alliance worked together. A good Spirit Creek garrison battle developed into a war between the cultivators from both sides. Myriad Demon Ridge didn't realize the seriousness of the problem at first. Currently, the active Myriad Demon Ridge teams were all triumphant and invincible. In their minds, Myriad Demon Ridge had an absolute advantage this time by relying on the bone piece. After the final merger of the continents, they only needed to clean up the remaining enemies. Then, the entire continent would be their world. However, as time passed and the news continued to spread, the Myriad Devil Ridge suddenly realized that there was a team of a few hundred people gathered in the Grand Heaven Alliance. They were constantly sweeping around the outer circle. Many teams from the Myriad Devil Ridge had already encountered them, and each time, they suffered heavy casualties. The situation was different from what they expected. Not only did Myriad Demon Ridge fail to control the situation, but they were also beaten to a pulp. Myriad Demon Ridge teams of varying numbers also began to converge. However, it was obviously impossible to gather enough manpower to fight against Grand Heaven Alliance at this moment. After a few days of killing, Myriad Demon Ridge's original advantage in numbers was gone. In the periphery, Grand Heaven Alliance had the advantage in numbers. In the end, the situation developed into two groups of cultivators chasing each other around the periphery of the continent. On the 6th day after the continent was formed, the travel-worn Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators stopped. Now there were more than 1,000 cultivators in their camp. Not only were there cultivators from the outer circle, but there were also cultivators from the inner circle. Their cultivations might be 8th order, 9th order, or even heaven-grade secret arts. Recently, they had not been having a good time. They had been fleeing pathetically under the pursuit of the experts of the Myriad Demons Ridge. When they heard that their own camp was developing well in the outer circle, they ran over to seek shelter. Naturally, everyone welcomed them. Even though these cultivators with profound cultivation bases would be able to unleash about the same level of power as everyone else in the outer circle due to Tianji's mediation, an additional person would always be an additional source of power. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the survival rate of the cultivators in the outer circle to exceed 1,000. The number of cultivators continued to increase as more and more cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance rushed out from the interior of the continent. In the past, these high-level cultivators would only move in areas that were suitable for them to display their strength. They wouldn't easily go to areas where low-level cultivators were active. This was the same reason why Cloud River Tier and True Lake Tier cultivators wouldn't force their way into the Spirit Stream battlefield. Cultivation wasn't easy. If they died in the hands of an enemy of the same level, they could only blame themselves for not being skilled enough. However, if they were accidentally killed by someone whose cultivation base was much lower than theirs, they wouldn't be able to die in peace. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, there was a precedent where a True Lake Tier cultivator was killed by a Spirit Stream Tier cultivator. This caused the sect to lose a lot of face, and became the laughingstock of the cultivation world. Right now, the Grand Heaven Alliance was chasing after a group of about 600 cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge. They were the only cultivators left in the outer circle. The reason why they stopped was because the ghost cultivators who were temporarily acting as scouts at the front sent back some information. The 6 factions of cultivators each had their own advantages. The ghost cultivators ran the fastest and were good at sneaking, assassinating, and tracking. Spying on the enemy and tracking the enemy's whereabouts naturally fell on the ghost cultivators. Right now, the Grand Heaven Alliance's group had expanded to 1,000 people. Considering that this was already a war, everyone temporarily elected a decision-making circle a few days ago. This decision-making circle was made up of a total of 9 people who represented the 9 continents of the 9 continents. The strength of the 9 people wasn't stronger than the others. It was only related to the prestige of the sect and their respective connections. 8 of them were from rank 7 sections. Only Lu Yi was from a rank 9 sect and represented the War province. Furthermore, his cultivation base was the lowest. However, no one had any objections. This was because the Grand Heaven Alliance's current situation could be said to have developed step by step with the 2 people from the Jade Blood sect as the core. Without Lu Yi and Hua Xi's various miraculous methods, the Grand Heaven Alliance would have lost the ability to compete with the Myriad Demons Ridge. Right now, the 9 people gathered together and stood at a high point, looking into the distance. A young cultivator said, according to the information sent back by the ghost cultivators, many people from the Myriad Demons Ridge ran over from the inner area to join them. Right now, there are about 800 people over there and they're reorganizing. It seems like they want to fight to the death with us. These days, the Myriad Demons Ridge was really angry. They didn't know how the originally good situation developed into this. They were even chased by the Grand Heaven Alliance like dogs. They felt very aggrieved. Seeing that the remaining Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators in the outer area were unable to fight against the Grand Heaven Alliance, the cultivators in the inner area couldn't sit still anymore. They sent out a group of people to join the low-level cultivators on their side and prepared to fight against the Grand Heaven Alliance. After the 2 groups joined, there were about 800 people. In this way, the difference in the number of cultivators between the 2 camps wasn't that big. Even if the Grand Heaven Alliance had a slight advantage, they wouldn't have much of an advantage if they really fought. Moreover, the Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators weren't just waiting there. They would also set up some methods, such as letting formation cultivators set up formations. As long as there was enough time, they could set up all kinds of formations over there and wait for the enemy to be exhausted. They would reduce the disadvantage of the number of people. If the Grand Heaven Alliance dared to attack, they would definitely suffer heavy casualties. Under normal circumstances, no matter which side it was, they wouldn't dare to act rashly in such a situation. However, the ghost cultivators also discovered another interesting thing, which was the position that the Myriad Demons Ridge occupied now. After the young man finished speaking, he turned to look at Lu Yi. Junior brother Lu Yi, don't you think that position is a bit familiar? At this moment, Lu Yi was using his eyesight to look over there. He compared the surrounding terrain and even looked at the sun in the sky. He nodded and said, "That's the chess island that we were at before." He and Hua Xi appeared there as soon as they entered the chess ocean. After that, they stayed there for close to 20 days. They were more familiar with that position than anyone else. He and Hua Xi stood at the high point there many times to observe the surroundings. In other words, we've already circled around and come back? A short man touched his head. The young man said with a smile, "That's right. We've come back again." "I understand now." Another woman's eyes lit up. "It's the spirit-gathering formation that junior brother Lu Yi left behind. These bad guys from the Myriad Demons Ridge have been running for days and have consumed a lot of energy. Now that they suddenly found such a place with good feng shui, they definitely won't be willing to leave. They'll recover faster if they stay there. No wonder they dare to stop." Lu Ye's expression was a bit strange. After the final merger of the chess island, everyone decided to take the initiative to attack. He and Hua Xi had left all kinds of traps there. He never thought that they would become the reason for the enemies to stay there. They didn't want to walk on the path to heaven but insisted on barging into the door to hell. If the people from the Myriad Demons Ridge continued to run, the Haotian Alliance wouldn't be able to do anything to them. However, they chose to stay in that place. "Junior brother Lu Yi, you've made a great contribution this time," the female cultivator said excitedly. Everyone, it's time to show the might of our Hautian alliance. The young man's expression turned serious. There's no time to lose. I think we should attack that place immediately. What do you think? What else could they think? The others all agreed. The sooner, the better. If they delayed any longer, the enemies would have more trap. This battle might be the last large-scale collision between the two camps. The number of people participating in the battle would be close to 2,000. After this battle, if everything went well, the Myriad Demons Ridge would no longer have the capital to fight against the Hautian alliance in the outer circle. If they wanted to kill as many enemies as possible, they needed to plan carefully. The 9 of them gathered here to discuss. Suddenly, Lu Yi checked his battlefield imprint and received a message. A moment later, he frowned. Everyone, there might be a trap over there. What do you mean? The others looked at him. My 4th senior brother just sent me a message. He found a group of about 300 cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge lying in ambush in a forest. They seem to be waiting for something. Judging from their position, they're only 20 miles away from us. Also, those people should have gathered from the inner circle. When they heard this, they looked at each other and immediately understood the plan of the Myriad Demons Ridge. The message came from Li Baxian, so it shouldn't be wrong. If 300 reinforcements from the Myriad Demons Ridge arrived during the battle, it was very likely that the Hautian alliance would be caught off guard. Did they discover the traps left behind over there? The others immediately thought of this possibility. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and shook his head. Not necessarily. The mushrooms that Hua Ci planted are real mushrooms. Even if the people from the Myriad Demons Ridge discovered them, they wouldn't care too much. Hua Ci's methods didn't show any signs of being exposed. Moreover, even if the people from the Myriad Demons Ridge noticed the abnormality of those mushrooms, they can make up for it in time with the help of senior brother Lu and the others' mechanical creations. Therefore, the Myriad Demons Ridge is purely scheming against us. If that's the case, we'll beat them at their own game. Soon, a plan was formulated. Lu Yi contacted Li Baxian at the same time and asked him to keep an eye on the movements of the 300 cultivators and to communicate with him at any time. Li Baxian naturally agreed. Speaking of which, he also came to seek refuge with Lu Yi. When he first entered the Chess Sea, he said that he would look for Lu Yi after the continent was formed. However, at that time, he considered that he could protect Lu Yi. However, the development of the situation was unexpected. Now that he came here, he needed Lu Yi's protection. As a senior brother, he felt embarrassed. Chapter 197. The Hautian alliance started to move. They split into 3 groups. One group rushed forward while the other 2 flanked from the left and right. In this way, they were able to form a semi-encirclement. They left a gap for the other party. Firstly, it was unrealistic to go around the back. Secondly, they were afraid that if they forced too much, it would stimulate the enemy's fighting spirit. Everyone knew the most basic common sense of encircling 3 groups and blocking one. The cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge immediately sensed the movement. However, they did not intend to escape. Instead, they rubbed their palms together and prepared to avenge their humiliation. Under the arrangement of the troops, the Myriad Devil Ridge's side quickly formed a tight formation, waiting for the attack. The 3 groups of Hautian alliance cultivators slowly arrived at their designated positions and waited quietly. A dazzling beam of light suddenly shot up to the sky. It was Lu Yushan's Thunder Dragon cannon. At the same time, it was also a signal. The moment the roar sounded, thousands of cultivators from the Hautian alliance rushed forward together with a shocking momentum. Spells and flying lights from imperial weapons began to collide in midair. The Hautian alliance quickly gained the upper hand with their advantage in numbers. Although it was not too obvious, it did form a certain degree of suppression on the Myriad Devil Ridge. As time passed, and the Myriad Devil Ridge intentionally retreated, the encirclement began to shrink. The cultivators from both sides officially collided. The small groups were entangled with each other, and it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. Lu Yi and Hua Xi stayed at the back and did not participate in this battle. They were waiting for a message. If that was really a trap set by the myriad devil ridge, then the message should arrive soon. Just as the two groups of cultivators were fighting fiercely, Lu Yi felt a movement in his battlefield mark. He lowered his head to check and then nodded to Hua Xi. "It's our turn." Fourth senior brother sent a message saying that the 3 million cultivators from the myriad devil ridge, who were lying in ambush 20 miles away, had already moved out. Obviously, they wanted to kill their way over while the two groups were busy fighting. In this way, they could tear apart the Hautian Alliance's formation and cooperate with the cultivators on their side. As long as they could open up the situation on one of the fronts, the myriad devil ridge could continue to expand their advantage and inflict heavy losses on the Hautian Alliance. This was also the reason why the myriad devil ridge cultivators who were attacked were weak. Firstly, the Hautian Alliance did have the advantage in numbers. Secondly, they were taking advantage of the situation. If they did not give the Hautian Alliance some hope, how could they successfully carry out the next plan? Of course, with the current situation, it was unknown if they could make it in time. Lu Yi and Hua Xi each had a pair of red and green wings spread out from their backs as they soared into the sky. They quickly crossed the frontmost battlefield and arrived at the center, where they quietly floated there. For a moment, many cultivators from the myriad devil ridge looked over. In this place where no one could fly, 2 people from the Grand Heaven Alliance suddenly flew over. Naturally, it attracted a lot of attention. The people of the Myriad Demons Ridge immediately sensed that something was wrong. Someone immediately flew toward Lu Yi and Hua Xi. However, before he could get close, he lost his strength. The enemy was flying too high. Lu Yi raised his blade and secretly channeled his spiritual energy. He stood in front of Hua Xi. His current mission was very simple: protect Hua Xi's safety and let her display her skills. After a brief scan, Hua Xi confirmed that the setup she had set up earlier had taken effect. She nodded and said, "Let's begin." She took a deep breath, and her full chest heaved up and down. Then, a dark green halo swept out in all directions, instantly enveloping half of the battlefield. Exclamations immediately came from below. When Hua Xi's method began to take effect, many cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge noticed that something was wrong. The spiritual energy in their bodies suddenly became obscure, as if they were suffering from the symptoms of pill toxins. This caused many people's strength to plummet in a very short period of time. If this happened under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, they were currently in a life-and-death battle with the cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance. The originally evenly matched battle immediately became a life-and-death battle due to the change in spiritual energy. In just a few breaths of time, miserable screams came one after another from below. Blood and broken limbs flew everywhere. Many cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge were in trouble. "It's that woman's doing. Kill her quickly!" A cultivator from the Myriad Demons Ridge shouted as he was seriously injured. The next moment, his head was chopped off. With a soft sound, a stream of light shot from below. It wasn't a flying weapon but an arrow. Someone was holding a bow-shaped spirit weapon and shot an arrow at Hua Xi. However, this arrow was blocked by Lu Ye's blade and didn't hurt her at all. Chi, the archer below was skilled in archery. With a flick of his fingers, streams of light shot out. Lu Yi brandished the long saber in his hand, deflecting the arrows one after another, causing his hand to feel numb. After a few breaths of time, the bow-wielding cultivator was chopped into pieces by several cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance. Dark green halos rippled outwards. Although Hua Xi had been here for many days, she had never been able to continuously activate her ability like this. The number of people participating in this battle couldn't be compared to before. If she wanted to end the battle here as soon as possible, she could only use her full strength like this. In just 10 minutes, Hua Xi's face began to turn pale. At a certain moment she softly called out, "Lu Yi." Lu Yi quickly turned around and grabbed Hua Xi's waist. He took her out of the battlefield and flapped his fiery red wings, instantly leaving the battlefield. Hua Xi was fine, but she had consumed too much of her spiritual power. However, before she left, the myriad Devil Ridge couldn't hold on anymore. Originally, there were 800 cultivators gathered here, which was only 200 less than the Grand Heaven Alliance. However, the difference in numbers had expanded to more than 500. One could imagine how many casualties the myriad Devil Ridge had suffered in this short period of time. The cultivators who were still alive fled toward the gap behind them. At this moment, the speed of their escape was very important. They didn't need to run faster than the enemy, but they just needed to be faster than their own people. The Grand Heaven Alliance couldn't chase them until they were completely annihilated. There would always be some who escaped. After 15 minutes, the battlefield was full of corpses. The smell of blood was so thick that it almost couldn't disperse. Less than 100 cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance had died. The cultivators gathered and didn't chase after those who escaped. Instead, they turned around and killed toward the center of the continent. In that direction, there was a group of 300 cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge coming to help. They had received news that the Grand Heaven Alliance had taken the bait and was fighting with them. Therefore, they quickly rushed over. With their speed, they were about to reach the battlefield. However, when they looked up, they didn't see any cultivators from their side. Instead, they saw a group of Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators who were in a killing frenzy charging towards them. The 3 million cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge were dumbfounded. Where were the 800 cultivators from their side? Until now, they had received news from the cultivators who escaped. Only 200 of the 800 cultivators were left. They were fleeing and were told to run as well. The 300 cultivators who came to help were so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. This battle was originally a trap that they had set. As long as the Grand Heaven Alliance dared to step into it, they would definitely suffer. However, the 800 cultivators were killed and scattered before they could do anything. They were simply incompetent. Although they couldn't wait to kill all those people who were running away, they also knew that they were in a bad situation. Although they were all from the inner circle and had high cultivation, they really couldn't use their strength to their advantage in this place. Numbers were the key to victory. 300 cultivators against 900 cultivators. It was obvious that they couldn't win with brute force. Therefore, without hesitation, the 300 cultivators who were rushing to the battlefield immediately turned around and prepared to escape. They didn't need to escape too far. They only needed to run for a few dozen miles, and the Grand Heaven Alliance wouldn't be able to chase after them. The deeper they went, the stronger their strength would be. Most of the Grand Heaven Alliance's cultivators were low-level cultivators. If they dared to chase after them, they would be courting death. However, they didn't run far when a large formation suddenly formed and enveloped them. The large formation's lethality wasn't too strong, but the formation's power made the bodies of those who were trapped in it heavy and slow their movements. The group of cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge looked around in shock. They saw a petite female cultivator standing on a big tree and looking at them with a smile. The female cultivator also had a formation plate that was emitting a dazzling light in her hand. "Feng Yuechan!" someone exclaimed, and his expression changed abruptly. Feng Yuechan alone wasn't enough to shock them, but Li Baxian was definitely in the place where Feng Yuechan appeared. There was also a group of Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators who followed them. As expected, a low shout was heard. "Sword formation!" As soon as the words were spoken, sword lights suddenly burst out from the large formation. They shuttled back and forth, bringing out a string of blood. This large formation was set up by Feng Yuechan and Li Baxian together. It was hastily formed and wasn't very powerful. However, Li Baxian integrated all of his flying swords into this formation, increasing the lethality of the formation by several levels. Another 30 cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance appeared out of nowhere. They used all of their skills to harass and delay the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators' escape speed. Rumbling sounds were heard. The 900 cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance were chasing after them. Seeing this scene, the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who were trapped in the large formation all showed despair. Chi-chi-chi sounds could be heard continuously. Spells and imperial equipment's flowing light covered the sky and covered the ground. Someone suddenly laughed out loud. I killed a heaven level 9. Ha ha ha, I can't believe I have such a day. The killer was just an ordinary 7th order cultivator. There was a difference of 200 spirit apertures between him and a heaven grade 9th layer cultivator. Normally, he wouldn't be able to fight against such a master. However, in this special environment, the weak had defeated the strong. A heaven grade 9th layer cultivator was definitely the guardian of a large sect in the core circle. He probably wouldn't have thought that he would die at the hands of such a weakling. It wasn't just one expert that was killed by the weak. Many of the 300 people from the myriad Devil Ridge were experts that had switched to cultivating a heaven-class cultivation technique. However, at this moment, their fire of life was withering one after another. These low-level cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance might find that their merit points had increased by tens of points as they fought. The situation was in their favor. Li Baxian raised his arm and shouted, "Little ones, it's time for revenge." Saying so, he was the first to charge forward with his sword. The masters who had followed him all the way here followed him with bloodshot eyes and murderous intent. They had been too aggrieved all this time. Only now could they vent the anger in their hearts. Chapter 198. After a great battle, less than 50 of the 300 myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who came as reinforcements managed to escape. Many of them were guardian envoys from the major sects in the core region. Even Yen Xing, who was ranked second on the spirit stream list, was severely injured and had to escape. Yen Xing was also unlucky. Ever since he fought with Li Baxian in the spirit stream battlefield, he knew that he couldn't take revenge with his own strength. The spirit stream battle was a great opportunity, so he had been paying attention to Li Baxian's location and movements. After the continent was formed, he immediately joined forces with the other myriad Devil Ridge cultivators to chase after Li Baxian's whereabouts. He was just in time for this battle and was involved in it. Then, he was taught a lesson by a group of low-level cultivators who he usually wouldn't even look at. This was a victory for the Grand Heaven Alliance, and it was also a celebration for the low-level cultivators. This battle perfectly demonstrated what it meant to have the advantage in numbers. After the battle, the Grand Heaven Alliance only needed to rest for a while before they split into two groups under the leadership of the powerhouses from the core circle. They searched for and eliminated the enemy cultivators from the outer circle and the inner circle. As the news spread, more and more powerhouses from the core circle joined in. Originally, they were defeated by the people from the myriad Devil Ridge, but they didn't expect the situation to turn around. The low-level cultivators on their side were so capable. Before the merging of the continents was completed, the myriad Devil Ridge had the upper hand in terms of both high-level and low-level cultivators. Even if they had a team with the two from the Jade Blood sect as the core, they could not make up for the difference in numbers. Under such circumstances, as long as the myriad Devil Ridge was determined, the Grand Heaven Alliance's chances of survival would only become smaller and smaller. It was not possible to annihilate the entire Grand Heaven Alliance before the battle to guard Lingxi. However, it was still possible to annihilate 80 to 90% of them. This would achieve the initial goal set by the myriad Devil Ridge. In the next few decades, the Grand Heaven Alliance would lose many people who could support them and would no longer be able to compete with the myriad Devil Ridge. However, the myriad Demon's Ridge had been careless after all. With the situation in their favor, everyone had relaxed a little. In other words, no one had expected that there would be such an invincible team of low-level cultivators. In just a few days, this team swept through the outer circle of the continent and killed the people from the myriad Devil Ridge. In the final battle, they even killed a large number of high-level cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge. As a result, the advantageous situation was changed. The Grand Heaven Alliance definitely had the advantage in terms of low-level cultivators, and it was far more than the myriad Devil Ridge. In terms of high-level cultivators, they were about the same. After all, the Grand Heaven Alliance had suffered great losses in the past 20 days. However, in the entire Chess Sea continent, the situation of the Hautian Alliance had been completely revived. Now, it was the Hautian Alliance's turn to capture the cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge. Little junior brother, you and junior sister Huasii have won a lot of face for the sect this time. This old man is probably smiling in his dreams. Li Baxian's voice rang out. After the previous battle, he and Feng Yuechan did not participate in the follow-up. Instead, they found Lu Yi, who was protecting Huasii. Then himself. It's mainly because of Huasii. Lu Yi replied vaguely as he chewed on his jerky. This was the truth. The most he could do was to provide spirit-gathering runes for the cultivators on his side to recover. Not only could Huasii heal others, she could also help them kill their enemies. Li Baxian turned to look at Huasii, who was whispering to Feng Yuechan. He nodded. Junior sister Huasii contributed the most. You're not insignificant either. He winked at Lu Yi. Where did you find this junior sister? Find a few more later. Lu Ye's cheeks puffed up as he ate in big mouthfuls. Li Baxian patted his shoulder. With you guys in the sect, I'm much more relieved. Let's go. I'll take you on a treasure hunt. Lu Yi was instantly interested. He hurriedly gulped down the food in his mouth. His throat slid down slowly. What treasure hunt? I don't know. It depends on luck. Li Baxian smiled gently. He grabbed his wine gourd and threw it to Lu Yi. Lu Yi looked around, opened the gourd, and took a sip. Suddenly, his stomach felt like it was on fire. At the same time, a feeling of dizziness rushed to the top of his head. He immediately staggered. In a panic, he hurriedly changed his secret art and activated gluttonous meal. A buzzing sound came from his stomach as he dispelled the drunkenness. After a while, he stood firm and shook his head. So strong. He threw the wine gourd to Li Baxian. He knew that he couldn't drink too much of this wine. Drinking one mouthful was his limit. Li Baxian laughed. Although it was a treasure hunt, they couldn't find anything good. Perhaps there were many precious treasures before, but as the cultivators of both camps continued to wander and search, all the good things were taken away. Along the way, Huasii found a lot of herbs with her medical skills. She was accompanied by a mechanical wolf given to her by Lu Yushan's junior sister. The mechanical wolf was full of storage bags. After an hour, Li Baxian, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped and glanced in a certain direction. He smiled and asked, Little junior brother, can you kill an 8th Order realm cultivator? Lu Yi didn't know why he asked this question. He pondered for a moment and said, I should be able to. Can you really kill one? Li Baxian was a little surprised. On the Golden Light, Lu Yi was a 5th Order cultivator. He once said that if he went all out, he could kill a 7th Order cultivator. Facts proved that he did have such ability. Although he didn't kill a 7th Order cultivator at that time, he fought 43 battles in a row. In the last battle, he even killed the Sacred Flame Sect Saintess who destroyed her spirit aperture. Now that Lu Yi was a 6th Order cultivator, Li Baxian just remembered Lu Ye's words and asked casually. He didn't expect Lu Yi to give such an answer. Do you know that after a cultivator reaches the 7th Order, every time they break through to the next realm, their strength will increase more than before? Li Baxian looked at him seriously and nodded. In that case, let this brother open his eyes. While Lu Yi was confused, he saw Li Baxian look in a certain direction, Do you want to come out on your own, or do you want me to force you out? As soon as this was said, Feng Yuechan's figure suddenly fluttered and landed in a certain direction. After standing still, he and Li Baxian stared at the same spot. Lu Yi followed their gazes but couldn't see anything. There was only a big rock there. But in next to no time, something that shocked him occurred. Accompanied by a wave of distortion in the air beside the boulder, a thin figure appeared. It was a young man with a gloomy expression. He had a hooked nose, and his face was gloomy to the point it was about to drip water. Lu Yi didn't know what method he used to hide here perfectly. If Li Baxian hadn't seen through him at a glance, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to find him even if he stepped on the big rock. Li Baxian laughed. It's you. It looked like they knew each other. The Flowing Cloud sect has no enmity with the Pill Heart sect and the Jade Blood sect. Our Flowing Cloud sect didn't participate in the Battle of the Golden Light Summit. Li Baxian, tell me what you want. I just want to live, said the gloomy young man. Li Baxian raised his hand and scratched his chin, chuckling. Isn't the Flowing Cloud sect not participating because war was declared? Besides, you're from the Myriad Devil Ridge, and I'm from the Grand Heaven Alliance. Our camps are natural opposites. Didn't your grandfather tell you that the difference in camps is the reason for killing? The young man's tone became serious. Do you have to do this? As he spoke, he glanced at Lu Yi and Hua Xi. Obviously, he wanted to make an issue out of them. He wasn't weak, but Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan weren't easy to deal with. This pair of B*****s were always inseparable. Offending one was equivalent to offending two. No one could afford to offend them. Now, a large number of Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators were constantly searching for traces of the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it was. He originally wanted to escape to the periphery because the safest place in the entire continent was the periphery. Who would have thought that he would meet Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan here? His luck was so bad that he could choke on water. I'll show you a way out. Do you want to take it? Li Baxian looked at him with a smile. What? Li Baxian patted Lu Ye's shoulder. Fight with my junior brother. If you win, I'll let you go. Lu Yi and the young man were stunned. Lu Yi finally understood what his fourth senior brother meant when he asked him that question. The young man didn't look happy. Instead, he said angrily, Li Baxian, are you crazy? If I hurt or kill this little guy, can I still leave? He had heard about the incident at the Golden Light Summit, and had also deeply experienced the Jade Blood sect's style of protecting their own. That true lake stage expert killed his way into the Spirit Stream battlefield as he pleased, and even endured the damage from the soul-extinguishing godly lightning to kill a group of low-level cultivators. In the entire 9 continents, which sect's true lake stage expert would dare to do such a despicable thing? Only the Jade Blood sect. Therefore, when Li Baxian asked him to fight with Lu Yi, not only was he not happy, he even felt that he was being made fun of. As the old saying goes, when you're under someone else's roof, you have to lower your head. Looks like you don't understand your situation. Li Baxian lowered his eyes slightly. On the other side, spiritual power surged in Feng Yuechan's hand. A ball of compressed flame-like thing was tossed around in her small hand. The young man's eyes twitched. He knew that if he didn't agree, he would be besieged by the number 1 and number 10 on the Spirit Stream list. This was a mixed pair of sword cultivators and spell cultivators. At that time, there would be no way for him to survive. If I beat this little guy, will you really let me go? I guarantee it with my junior brother's reputation. Li Baxian patted Lu Ye's shoulder. Lu Yi frowned. Why did he have to guarantee it with his reputation? From another point of view, did his fourth senior brother not have much credibility? This was a big problem. Don't play such a childish game. Besides you, there's still Feng Yuechan. As for her, I guarantee it with my junior sister's reputation. Li Baxian pointed at Hua Xi, who was standing to the side. Hua Xi smiled very innocently. The young man said, Please make a heavenly oath. Cut the crap. Li Baxian angrily shouted. If I tell you to fight, then fight. So much nonsense, be careful or I'll send you flying with my sword. The young man suddenly felt extremely sullen. Who are you putting on this humiliated look for? If you fight with my junior brother, if you're lucky, you can drag someone down with you. Isn't this what you're thinking? Li Baxian coldly snorted, exposing the young man's thoughts.